Chapter 693. It's you. General Hong Yu's expression was extremely ugly. There was hatred and fear on his face. Although he had never seen Su Yu's real body, he knew that the cloud galloping horse's deadly poison was the main reason why the invincible Black Army had suffered such heavy casualties. The hearts of the invincible Black Army's soldiers trembled, and as they looked at the silver-haired Su Yu, their faces filled with unconcealable fear. It was as if the three crystals half-fairy youth before them was even more terrifying than the level 2 fairy they had killed. The Empire's army was startled, and the Seven Lords' Palace's people were also startled. Why is the invincible Black Army so afraid of Su Yu? The fourth Saint Master's gaze became serious as he locked on his Su Yu. He then frowned. It was obvious that Su Yu's cultivation was much weaker than he had imagined. It's just that his soul energy is quite extraordinary. The fourth Saint Master was relieved, as he had sensed that Su Yu's soul energy was unusual, which was why he had paid more attention to him. However, when he saw Su Yu's weak cultivation, he no longer paid any attention to him. This person is proficient in soul power. Be careful, the fourth Saint Master said. The eyes of the people from the Seven Lords' Palace shone brightly. Su Yu. Alliance Master Su, I'll have to trouble you, the Great Lord said as he turned around to face the fourth Saint Master. At the same time, he secretly signaled the other great monarchs with his eyes. Their hearts trembled at the same time, and they secretly transmitted their voices. I don't think that's appropriate. Alliance Master Su came all the way here to help us. Are we really going to abandon him and run? The second Lord frowned. The Seven Lords had known each other for many years, and they had already reached the level of communicating with each other through their eyes. They could clearly understand the Great Lord's gaze, and they knew that while Su Yu stalled the invincible Black Army, they would lead the Empire's army and escape from the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds. With the 4 Saint Masters present, they had no chance of winning. If they continued to fight, they would definitely be annihilated. Su Yu's appearance could slightly delay the invincible Black Army, while the Seven Lords' Palace could summon the Empire's army to attack the enemy fairies together. However, Su Yu had just saved them, yet he was abandoning them. Wasn't he biting the hand that fed him? Don't hesitate, as Su Yu's power is too low. Although I don't know how he managed to scare the invincible Black Army, he won't be able to turn the situation around. So, you should take advantage of this time to escape. I believe that even if the outside world finds out about this, they won't blame us. The Great Lord transmitted his voice to them anxiously. You don't need to say anything else. Leave immediately. After you escape, I will think of a way to leave. As for Su Yu, I owe him a favor. After he dies, I will take care of the Heavenly Law Alliance on his behalf. The members of the Seven Lords' Palace all looked ashamed. They gritted their teeth and sighed silently. Without batting an eyelid, they shifted the battlefield towards the Empire's army. They were prepared to summon the army and retreat at any time. As Su Yu looked at the invincible Black Army, his gaze pierced through them and locked onto the giant cage. Release the arrows. He's only one person. There's nothing to worry about. General Hong Yu suppressed the trembling in his heart and scolded. Su Yu was expressionless. He held the silver longbow in his hand and strode toward them. He said coldly, "If you don't want to die, get out of my way." The archers, who were on standby, looked at the silver-haired silhouette that was approaching them. They looked at the silver longbow, as well as the cloud galloping horse's poison, which was hidden in the arrows made of vital energy. The invincible Black Army had always had strict military discipline, and military orders were obeyed. There had never been a situation where General Hong Yu's orders were ignored. General Hong Yu was furious. Even in the face of a godmaster, his soldiers had never disobeyed. Anyone who disobeys orders will be killed. General Hong Yu shouted in a low voice. He raised a long sword at his waist and swung it down. 2 archers, who were closest to him, were beheaded on the spot. It was only at this moment that the invincible Black Army came back to their senses, and all of the archers shot their arrows. Su Yu coldly pulled his longbow. I gave you a chance. Sizzle. A white flame, which couldn't be detected by the naked eye, suddenly started burning in Su Yu's eyes. All of a sudden, The archers, who had just raised their bows, let out miserable screams. Their eyes became dim, and they instantly lost all signs of life. It was the white-eyed fire-glass frog's sole flame. In the twinkling of an eye, more than 10 archers had been killed. Such a sudden scene caused the hearts of the surrounding archers to tremble, and their movements became slightly slower. At this moment, Su Yu's vital energy arrow was shot out. As an explosive sound echoed, the cloud galloping horse's poison shot out in all directions, killing more than 10 people. Almost all of the enemy's archers had been killed. Spear wielders shoot. General Hong Yu's expression changed drastically. This was the first time that he had fought against Su Yu. He had assumed that Su Yu was only skilled in scheming and setting up traps. He didn't expect that Su Yu's fighting prowess would be so great. The remaining 30 or so archers were completely annihilated. Only 100 spear wielders were left. Hearing the order, the spear wielders hesitated. As they looked at Su Yu's cold face, they felt an indescribable fear. "All of you scram!" Su Yu shouted coldly as he stepped on the air. The archers had been killed in front of them, and Su Yu was closing in on them from behind. Even the strong-willed archers were starting to crumble. At that moment, General Hong Yu's order was completely disregarded. Even though some of them had the will to fight, they couldn't do anything about the panic in their hearts. The crowd parted. Su Yu, who had just been killing his enemies, had now lost the courage to even attack. General Hong Yu was extremely furious. Those who violate military orders will be executed. Sizzle. All of a sudden, a bolt of lightning descended 5 feet in front of him. Amidst the lightning, an arm appeared. The arm's golden internal energy channels were extremely peculiar, and a frightening physical strength was surging within it. General Hong Yu didn't expect this, and he shouted in shock, "Lightning escape!" Su Yu, who had been 1,000 feet away a moment ago, was now a blur. At this critical moment, General Hong Yu hurriedly punched out with both fists. As a Grade 1 fairy, his physical body wasn't any weaker than Su Yu's. As his fists collided, he managed to block Su Yu's sudden punch. However, before he could heave a sigh of relief, a golden light shot out of Su Yu's sleeves. It was so fast that it seemed like it had teleported. General Hong Yu's heart thumped wildly, and he immediately retreated. At the same time, he shouted, "Protect the Emperor!" Splutter. His shout was replaced by a muffled sound. Another small golden sword silently appeared behind him, and after he retreated for a moment, it sank into his back. His heart was shattered, and his life was quickly drained away. Su Yu, who had just stepped out of the lightning, wore an apathetic look on his face. Even if you ignore the invincible Black Army, you're still very weak. Su Yu's last words echoed in his ears. As for the remaining invincible Black Army soldiers, they were all shocked. General Hong Yu had been killed. Do you want to go back to Jiuzhou or die? Su Yu turned his head around and looked coldly at the spearmen. The gathering of 100 spearmen was extremely destructive. At the very least, to the dynasty's army, it was almost a disaster. After struggling for a while, the spearmen scattered. Some of them ran towards the 5th Saint Master, while only 2 or 3 of them, whose wills had been destroyed, chose to escape into the crevice and return to Jiuzhou. As Su Yu coldly looked at the spearmen who had gathered towards the 4th Saint Master, his eyes shone with a cold light. He held the silver bow in his hand and continuously shot out arrows. Miserable screams could be heard as more than 50 people were turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. "Lad, how dare you?" The 5th Saint Master couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. A trifling 3 crystals half-fairy had managed to kill almost all of the invincible Black Army. Even General Hong Yu, who was the commander of the army, had been killed. The eyes of the 7 Lords' Palace's people flickered as they looked at each other and nodded. "Alliance Master Su, please continue to hunt down the remaining invincible Black Army soldiers. The Empire of Darkness will definitely reward you for your help," the 2nd Lord said loudly. They were already very close to the Empire's army, and they only needed a single order to surround and kill the enemy's Saint Masters. After that, they would be able to escape with their army. As for Su Yu, he would most likely be held back by the 5th Saint Master, the 6th Saint Master, and the ninth Saint Master. However, Suyu didn't even turn around to look at them. He just calmly stepped into the cage and calmly said, "You have misunderstood me. The person I want to save is the Phoenix Cabinet's master. What does your life or death have to do with me?" Suyu's fist bombarded the iron cage, instantly shattering it. The iron cage had many seals, so the people inside it couldn't see what was happening outside. Hence, when the iron cage was broken, they were all shocked. However, the enemy that they had expected didn't appear. Instead, it was a young man. Suyu, the Phoenix Cabinet's master, and the other 9 beautiful women all cried out in alarm. All of the female disciples of the Phoenix Cabinet recognized Suyu's appearance. After all, when he had fought for Sienna in the past, many female disciples couldn't forget him. The Phoenix Cabinet's master didn't even blink her beautiful eyes. She even suspected that she was hallucinating. Are you really Suyu?" The Phoenix Cabinet's master's heart was beating wildly. She had never thought that the person who had come to save her when she was in danger would be Suyu, who had been missing for 3 years. Suyu sized up the Phoenix Cabinet's master. She was as beautiful as ever, dignified, elegant, and charming. She had also never been mistreated. Suyu heaved a sigh of relief. "Let's get out of here first. We can talk about this later." Suyu grabbed the Phoenix Cabinet's master's wrist and flew away with her. "All of you should escape with us." The 9 beautiful women's eyes lit up as they happily followed Suyu to escape. As they looked at Suyu pulling the Phoenix Cabinet's master, the 9 women smiled dejectedly. "Suyu, what are you doing? Are you going to abandon us?" The Great Lord was furious. He didn't even address Suyu as the Alliance Master. He just called Suyu by his name. Suyu turned around and looked at them coldly. "I never said that I came to save you. Moreover, do you really think that I don't know what you were planning? I have seen many people repay kindness with enmity, but it is rare to see people like you who don't know anything. The so-called 7 lords are just scoundrels who hide their evil deeds. What does your life and death have to do with me?" The Empire's people's movements were all under Suyu's control, so even the slightest of movements couldn't escape his eyes. The Great Lord was both embarrassed and angry. It was obvious that he hadn't expected that his plan would be seen through by Suyu. Suyu didn't pay any attention to him as he escaped with the women. 5 minutes later, in the sky above the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds. "Cabinet's master, please take them away." The Phoenix Cabinet is guarded by the Heavenly Law Alliance's people, so they can seek shelter for a while. Suyu let go of her, as a fragrant fragrance lingered in his palm. The Phoenix Cabinet's master's cheeks were slightly flushed, as she had been taken away by Suyu in front of so many female disciples. She was worried that the other disciples would discover her relationship with Suyu. "Aren't you going to leave with us?" The Phoenix Cabinet's master asked in surprise. "It seems like the 7 Lords' palace won't be able to hold on for long." Suyu shook his head as he surveyed the surroundings and sighed softly. The Jinlong continent's recovery is imminent, and only the crevice in the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds has yet to be sealed. We have already sacrificed too many people, so I can't just sit and watch as the otherworldly army makes a comeback. So, the crevice must be completely sealed. Are you going back? The Phoenix Cabinet's master bit her lips, while her eyes were filled with worry. She wanted to stop him, but she couldn't bring herself to say anything. She couldn't see through the current Suyu, regardless of whether it was his cultivation level, his status, or his inner thoughts. "Yes, I am duty-bound to help those who have shed their blood, those who have struggled endlessly, and those who haven't died in peace," Suyu said calmly. The continent was about to be destroyed, so he couldn't just stand by and watch. The Phoenix Cabinet's master pondered this for a moment, then turned around and said, "You should all leave first." The 9 disciples bowed and accepted the order, then looked at each other and smiled. They then covered their mouths and flew away. After they had left, the Phoenix Cabinet's master bit her lips while her face was flushed. She then walked forward and gave Suyu a gentle hug. "You must come back," the Phoenix Cabinet's master said softly. She then left Suyu's chest without even turning her head back. She didn't dare to turn her head back, as she was afraid that if she did, she wouldn't be able to bear to see him leave. Suyu nodded his head silently. As he watched the Phoenix Cabinet's master leave, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He then entered the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds once again. Chapter 694. As soon as he entered, he felt a strong wave of energy wash over him. When he looked over, he saw a group of messy people stumbling out of the crowd. The second lord took the lead. He was supported by the sixth lord, who was covered in blood and had a gaping hole in his abdomen. Blood was gushing out of the gaping hole in his abdomen. He was followed by 800 or 900 soldiers who were in a state of panic. Behind them were more than 100 figures. Shockingly, they were all otherworldly experts. As the Great Lord, you are really cruel and merciless. You don't even hesitate to sacrifice your own people. The fourth lord had his hands clasped behind his back as he chased after the Great Lord. After Suyu had escaped, the Great Lord had given up on the fourth lord and the fifth lord at the critical moment. At the same time, he had chosen to use a suicidal technique to force the fourth lord back. Only then did he manage to break free from the deadlock and escape with his army. However, while the fourth lord was unharmed, the Great Lord had suffered a fatal blow. As a grade 6 fairy, he had almost been killed. The Great Lord's face was as pale as a sheet of tin foil. Even when he heard the mockery coming from behind him, his expression didn't change. After all, he was willing to sacrifice Suyu, who was the King of Darkness's favorite successor, without hesitation. So, what more two trifling Great Lords? As he thought of Suyu, the Great Lord's face was filled with hatred. This lad has ruined my plans. Swoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air could be heard from in front of them. It was Suyu who had returned. You are so confident in sacrificing others, yet you are so angry just because you have suffered some injuries? In my eyes, the so-called 7 lords are merely a joke. Suyu's lips curled into a mocking smile as he laughed coldly. Regardless of whether it was the current 7 lords or the 7 lords of the previous generation who had concealed their strengths and bided their time, it was difficult for Suyu to feel any admiration for their actions. Perhaps it was because they had been the overlords of the continent for a long time, so they were used to disregarding the lives of others. How dare you come back? My army has suffered heavy casualties because of you. 2 of our lords have died, and we no longer have the strength to fight against the otherworldly experts. You cannot escape the blame, and you will become the greatest sinner of the Jinlong continent. The Great Lord was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Suyu chuckled. This is what you call slandering. Don't worry, the Jinlong continent does not need the protection of people like you. Whether I am a sinner or a hero, it is not up to you to decide. Suyu stopped smiling and coldly scolded him. He then turned his head to look at his pursuers, his eyes shining with a cold light. The fourth Saint Master was surprised. Interesting. I was planning to look for you in the Jinlong continent so that I could kill some time. I didn't expect you to come back by yourself. The fifth Saint Master, the sixth Saint Master, and the ninth Saint Master all looked at Suyu with cold gazes. The ninth Saint Master, in particular, was extremely shocked. The young man who had once been chased by him to the point where he had nowhere to hide had now become an existence that stood in the way of the 9 states army. It's really interesting. If you go back now, there will still be room for negotiation. However, if you insist on going your own way and barge into the Jinlong continent, don't blame me for being impolite. Suyu took a deep breath, as if he had made a decision. Hearing this, even those from the 7 lords' palace were flabbergasted, let alone the other sacred lords. Suyu's arrogance was unimaginable. Judging from his actions, it was clear that he had no intention of joining forces with the 7 lords' palace. However, how could he possibly fight against the otherworldly people alone? According to the rumors, his fighting prowess should only be able to hold off the 6th Saint Master, who was a grade 4 fairy. So, where did he get his confidence from? However, his confident expression caused one to be shocked and doubtful. Ha! The 4th Saint Master laughed heartily, as if he was amused and mocking Suyu. I never thought that there would be someone so arrogant in this barren land. All right, I don't care if you're really confident or just bluffing. I will give you a chance to live because of you. the fourth Saint Master's gaze suddenly shifted, and his tones softened a little. A chance to live? The Great Lord's eyes shone brightly. This group of people basically had no chance of survival. Even if one of them managed to survive, it would be extremely unlikely. As such, a chance of survival was enough to warrant his attention. After looking around, the Great Lord exchanged glances with the remaining two lords and slowly nodded. "All right, I agree." However, before he could finish his sentence, the fourth Saint Master sneered. "Did I ask you a question? I can take your head at any time. What right do you have to agree?" Then, he looked at Suyu with a smile. "What I want is your answer." Hearing this, the Great Lord's face darkened. However, he did not dare to voice his anger. "Tell me first, what do you want?" Suyu was calm and composed as he ignored the lords from the Seven Lords' Palace. The fourth Saint Master smiled. "Life is heavier than Mount Tai, but lighter than a feather. I want to know how many of you Jinlong people have integrity. Therefore, within the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, you will all kill each other. Only 10 of you will live. I will not go back on my words. The last 10 people standing will be able to escape this calamity." The fourth Saint Master smiled cruelly. Suyu's expression was cold and uninterested. The lords from the Seven Lords' Palace looked at each other, then fell silent. "Alliance Master Su, the continent is in danger. We are the few top-notch experts of the continent. If we all die here, the continent will be in danger. Please agree. With our abilities, we should be able to enter the top 10. The person who spoke was the second lord. He had a troubled look on his face. It was obvious that he was passing on a message for the Great Lord. Is he going to sacrifice others to save himself again? So you scoffed at this. Experts who could only survive if the enemy took pity on them had no right to continue protecting the continent. If the enemy kneeled before them once, they would never be able to stand up again. Sacrificing the lives of 900 soldiers to save a few cowardly people would mean that the continent would have no hope. That's not it. It would be easier to just kill you all." Suyu ignored the second lord's words and looked at the fourth Saint Master. The Seven Lords' Palace's faces tightened. Is Suyu crazy? Could it be that the Heavenly Law Alliance had been destroyed by the otherworldly army? They still did not know that the so-called otherworldly army had already been destroyed by Suyu. That's a pity. The fourth Saint Master's smile gradually disappeared. His eyes were filled with a dangerous aura and murderous intent. What was about to happen was bound to be a fierce battle. However, at that moment, the fourth Saint Master's eyes suddenly froze. He turned around and looked in the direction of the fisher. A look of respect flashed across his face. "If that's the case, I will give you another option. How about we have a duel in the arena? We will each choose 3 people to duel in the arena until all 3 of our enemies are dead. Only the last survivor will win. How about that?" The fourth Saint Master suggested again. "If you win, I will spare your lives. However, if you lose, don't blame me for not giving you a chance." What? The Seven Lords' Palace's faces lit up. There seemed to be a glimmer of hope in this duel. However, when they realized that the fourth Saint Master had appeared, their eyes dimmed. This duel would be a 3-on-3 duel. However, with the fourth Saint Master on their side, they would not lose. It seemed like there was a chance of survival, but there was no doubt about it. "Let's just fight. What's the point of teasing us like this?" The Great Lord sighed deeply and gave up. However, the fourth Saint Master's lips curled into a faint smile. "I will not participate. The fifth Saint Master, the sixth Saint Master, and the ninth Saint Master will participate. You can send any 3 people." When he said this, everyone was shocked. Even the otherworldly army could not understand what he was talking about. Suyu raised his eyebrows slightly, and his eyes shone with suspicion. This was a great advantage for Jinlong's side. Even though the Great Lord was heavily injured, they still had the Grade 5 Fairy's second Lord and the Grade 2 Fairy's sixth Lord, as well as Suyu, who had killed a Grade 3 Fairy before. Apart from the fourth Saint Master, the enemies only had the Grade 5 Fairy 5th Saint Master, the Grade 4 Fairy 6th Saint Master, and the Grade 1 Fairy 9th Saint Master. In this duel, the odds of victory were 50-50. Suyu did not believe that the fourth Saint Master would be so kind as to give them such a great chance of survival. His eyes flickered slightly as he quietly glanced at the depths of the fissure. Have you thought about it? Otherwise, I will attack now and destroy all of you. The fourth Saint Master's face turned cold. The Seven Lords' Palace looked at Su Yu anxiously. Su Yu thought for a moment, then nodded slightly. All right, but I will decide who to send. The fourth Saint Master's expression softened as he smiled. All right, it's up to you. The battlefield will be between the two armies. If you leave this place, you will automatically admit defeat. Su Yu nodded and stepped forward. He was one of the 3 people chosen. The 5th Saint Master, the 6th Saint Master, and the 9th Saint Master also stepped forward. Make your choice. You could choose 2 more people. The 4th Saint Master smiled. In the Seven Lords' Palace, the 2nd Lord and the 6th Lord took a deep breath. The life and death of 1,000 people depended on the 2 of them. This was especially true for the 2nd Lord, as he was the only one who could fight against the enemy's 5th Saint Master. The Great Lord's eyes were filled with worry. When he looked at Su Yu, he was even more worried. If he had a choice, he would not have allowed Su Yu to fight. Although it was rumored that Su Yu had killed a grade 3 fairy, he was still an arrogant person. The enemy's fairies were all experienced generals. How could a rash person like Su Yu compare to them? Now, he could only hope that Su Yu would not be so foolish as to implicate everyone. Alliance Master Su, please leave this to the 2nd Lord and the 6th Lord. You just need to watch from the side. If you succeed, I will be very grateful. The Great Lord said reluctantly. However, what caused everyone to be dumbfounded was that Su Yu replied without hesitation. Do I need to repeat what I just said? The Jinlong continent's survival is not up to you. I alone am enough. After he spoke, Su Yu looked at the 3 enemies. He put down his hands and said in a cold voice, Make your move. I will fight against the 3 of you alone. When he said this, both sides fell silent. The 4th Saint Master was startled, his expression turning grave. Su Yu had repeatedly threatened to kill them, but no one, including the 4th Saint Master, had taken him seriously. They had all thought that he was just bluffing. But now, in a battle of life and death, he was confident that he could fight against the 3 of them alone. He was either a lunatic or he really had the power to kill all of them. The Seven Lords' Palace's people were also stunned. When the Great Lord came back to his senses, he was both shocked and angry. Their only hope of survival was at hand. Yet Su Yu was arrogant enough to fight against the 3 of them alone. Even the 2nd Lord was no match for the 5th Saint Master's power. So, how could Su Yu possibly deal with 3 Saint Masters? Wasn't he just digging his own grave? Su Yu, if you want to die, why do you have to drag us into this? What enmity do we have with you? The Great Lord was furious. You have lost the battle, and the Heavenly Law Alliance has been destroyed. You have become a stray dog. If you want to die, I will not stop you. So, why do you want to harm me? The 2nd Lord and the 6th Lord, as well as the Empire's army, were all confused. Su Yu had come alone, without anyone from the Heavenly Law Alliance. Coupled with the fact that the Heavenly Law Alliance was weak, their defeat was expected. Almost everyone assumed that Su Yu had been defeated. At this moment, the 4th Saint Master stroked his chin and said in a playful tone, Although I don't know why you keep referring to us as the losers, according to what I know, the Heavenly Law Alliance has already defeated our invincible Black Army, and the Northern Continent has already been conquered by the Heavenly Law Alliance. I wonder if the Alliance Master Su that you speak of is the same person as the Heavenly Law Alliance Master. If he is, then no matter what, you shouldn't have the right to call him the losers, right? The Empire's army fell into a deathly silence. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock as they stared at Su Yu. The Heavenly Law Alliance had won, and they still had to deal with that terrifying army? If this news had not come from the enemy's leader, none of them would have believed it. The Great Lord, the 2nd Lord, and the 6th Lord were all petrified. After a long while, the 2nd Lord sucked in a breath of cold air. He could not hide the shock in his eyes. The Heavenly Law Alliance was a weak faction, and it would be difficult for them to even delay an ordinary otherworldly army. So, how could they possibly defeat the invincible Black Army? More importantly, the Heavenly Law Alliance's master, Su Yu, was right in front of them. The Great Lord's old face stiffened, and he muttered to himself, "Impossible! It's impossible!" The fourth Saint Master looked at him with pity, then laughed and shook his head. "What's the point of thinking that it's impossible? He's just a piece of trash. I don't know where you got the courage to look down on this lad. You are really ignorant and fearless." Then he looked at Suyu with a smile. "You're fighting 1 against 3. You are really daring. I'm looking forward to it." A bright light flickered in his eyes. Chapter 695. The 2015 Elimination of Pornography and Illegal Publications campaign is currently in progress, and the Yuewen Group will cooperate with the relevant departments to submit information. Authors, please be careful when you write. Don't make any subtle movements, as they are difficult to detect. However, under the soul eyes, which can see through everything, everything will be clear. Suyu raised his brows slightly, while a faint light flashed in his eyes. "Make your move. I will fight against 3 of you at once. However, I will kill you first." Suyu stood with his hands clasped behind his back, while a faint smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. He looked at the 3 people in front of him, then fixed his sharp gaze on the 9th Saint Master, Yuzhong. The grudge between him and the kidnapping of the Phoenix Cabinet's master in the past could finally be put to rest. The 5th Saint Master slightly furrowed his brows. "Yuzhong, do you know him?" Yuzhong looked at Su Yu's eyes, while his expression became gloomy. He was just an ant in the past, but now he has grown so much. Although his strength has increased, his temperament has not improved. He actually dared to fight against 2 great masters by himself. How foolish. He is really arrogant. The 6th Saint Master shouted coldly, while his eyes were filled with hatred and fear. "I alone am enough to deal with such an arrogant person. There is no need for the 5th Saint Master to make a move." The 5th Saint Master waved his hand, while his indifferent expression was filled with vigilance. "You must not be careless. Since this lad can lead a disorderly group of people to defeat the invincible Black Army, he must be extraordinary. Now that he is fighting against 3 of us, he must have some tricks up his sleeves. Hence, we must not be careless. In this battle, Yu Zhong will take the lead, while the 6th Saint Master and I will attack him from both sides." After giving his instructions, the 5th Saint Master fixed his gaze on Su Yu. He then said leisurely, "The original plan was for me to lead the army and wipe out the northern continent. Our battle came too late." Su Yu's eyes were as cold as the starry sky. "You should be glad that you did not come to the battlefield personally. Otherwise, the person standing in front of me right now would be someone else. In other words, if the 5th Saint Master had been the one leading the army, he would have most likely died in that battle. Is that so? Then, let me see how powerful the Heavenly Law Alliance's master is." The 5th Saint Master's eyes shone with a fierce light. "Attack!" As soon as the order was given, the 3 Saint Sovereigns turned into afterimages and attacked the 3 Saint Sovereigns. Su Yu's eyes never left the moon bell. After a long while, the cold light in his eyes was like the stars in a dark night. It was both bright and cold. Being stared at by Su Yu, Yu Zhong felt a chill run down his spine, as if he was being stared at by a man-eating monster. However, when he saw the 2 holy masters with powerful auras in front of him from the corner of his eye, he relaxed slightly. He snorted coldly and said, "Brat, do you hate me? But what can you do to me? With the 2 lords here, you'd better take care of your own life first. After killing you, this Saint Lord will capture those women." The cold light in Su Yu's eyes became even more intense. The corners of his mouth curled up into an ice-cold arc. He looked extremely evil. "Ah, I have said that I will kill you first. They will not be able to save you. Brat, you better take care of yourself first." A thunderous shout echoed in Su Yu's ears as the 5th Saint Master took the initiative to attack him. A terrifying vital energy revolved around the tip of his feet as he kicked Su Yu's chest. At the same time, the 6th Saint Master, who was attacking Su Yu from the right, grabbed a shining long sword and aimed it at Su Yu's heart. The 2 of them attacked Su Yu fiercely, as if they were flying at lightning speed. Su Yu did not even have time to react before he was pierced through in an instant. This scene caused the pupils of the 7 Lords' Palace's people, who were watching the battle nervously, to shrink. Was it going to end just like that? At the very least, He did not even have the power to resist. Creak! With a dull sound, Suyu's body turned into pieces and withered away like a flower. A clone. Not good. Yuzhong. The moment the fifth Saint Master attacked, he realized that something was wrong and turned around to help. The fourth Saint Master's expression changed drastically. What a cunning brat. When did you leave a clone behind? The two of them turned around to look. Behind Yuzhong, who had been following closely behind them, a figure made of flames had appeared out of nowhere. It appeared behind Yuzhong without a sound and grabbed at his back with a palm. Yuzhong was not prepared for this at all. He only had time to turn around and look at the blurry yet cold face. Fourth Saint Master, please save him. At this critical moment, the fifth Saint Master could only ask for help from the fourth Saint Master, who was watching the battle from the side. Even if it was against the rules, they could not let their own people die. However, what shocked them was that the fourth Saint Master did not move at all. His facial expression did not change, as if he was a stone statue. As the ninth Saint Master screamed, his chest was pierced through by the flaming fist. However, he did not move at all. Creak! Finally, with a creak, the fourth Saint Master shattered into pieces and turned into dust. The fourth Saint Master's clone. The fifth Saint Master and the sixth Saint Master were both shocked. The real fourth Saint Master had already left, leaving behind only an illusory image. Just as I said, the fourth Saint Master set up the arena just to stall for time. The Scarlet Jade doppelganger glanced at the ninth Saint Master, who had died with his eyes wide open. He slowly retracted his flaming fist and murmured softly. The people of the Seven Lords' Palace could not understand this unexpected situation. So you left behind two clones. Where's his real body? The Great Lord's heart skipped a beat. Suyu had said that he was going to fight the three of them alone, but he had already left. How could the rest of them be a match for the fifth Saint Master and the sixth Saint Master? The second Lord, who barely managed to survive, was a level 5 fairy. He was not even as strong as the fifth Saint Master, let alone the sixth Saint Master, who was a level 4 fairy. With such a great disparity in power, they would definitely be wiped out. He left a long time ago, the flaming clone said indifferently. The Great Lord's vision darkened, and he almost fainted. Suyu, you have misled the Seven Lords' Palace. If Suyu had not been so careless and joined forces with them, they would have had a chance of defeating the three of them. However, Suyu had now fled and left them behind to face the otherworldly army alone. This was the second time he had pushed them into a trap. My plan is flawless, so there is no need for you to sigh. The flaming clone snorted softly as it shot a lightning-like gaze at the fifth Saint Master. I left you a surprise. I wanted to give it to you when you arrived in the North Continent, but it was delayed until now. However, it is not too late, so enjoy it. After it finished speaking, it looked at the fourth Saint Master and took a deep breath. Heaven Sun gazing at air technique, soul control. Activate. The fourth Saint Master, who had a puzzled look on his face, suddenly lost his focus and became like a wooden puppet. The change happened in an instant, without any warning. Whoosh! At the same time, the fourth Saint Master flipped his palm and stabbed his long sword at the fifth Saint Master, who was right in front of him. The two of them were standing side by side, and the sudden change happened in a single breath. How could they guard against it? With a miserable cry, the fifth Saint Master's chest was pierced through. Did you betray us? No, you're being controlled. After all, he was a level 5 fairy. Even though the sword had pierced through his body, his life was not in danger. The sixth Saint Master covered his bleeding chest and retreated quickly. He stared at the unconscious sixth Saint Master in shock and confusion. He had always been with the fourth Saint Master, so how could he not have noticed when he was being controlled? He did not know that Suyu had used the Heaven Sun gazing at air technique to imprint a seal on his body. The sixth Saint Master did not notice it at all, and Suyu could activate the seal with just a thought. At that time, his consciousness would be suppressed, and he would obey all of Suyu's orders. The Heaven Sun gazing at air technique soul control realm allowed one to control experts who were not one realm higher than him. Suyu had used it on him for the first time. His original intention was to give the fifth Saint Master a fatal blow during the battle. However, he had not used it until now. Why should a dead person know so much? The Scarlet Jade clone said calmly as his gaze swept past the Seven Lords' palace. I will leave the rest to you. If you can't even deal with the severely injured fifth Saint Master, then there is no need for the Seven Lords' palace to exist. Goodbye. The people of the Seven Lords' palace who had witnessed everything were extremely shocked. Suyu planned this all along? As they thought about it, they all felt ashamed. Suyu was clearly their junior, but in front of him, they were like newborn juniors. Even the Great Lord could not help but blush. After hesitating for a moment, the Great Lord asked hesitantly, "May I ask where Alliance Master Su is?" The Scarlet Jade clone said calmly as he retreated. At the end of the crevice, I have sent you a message. You should all leave the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds as soon as possible. Everything is not over yet. As they watched the Scarlet Jade clone disappear, everyone felt an indescribable emotion. It was as if they had seen the figure of a young man standing alone at the edge of the ocean, turning the tide. Let's fight. Let's not be a burden to him. The Great Lord had mixed feelings as he swept his gaze over the enemy. The enemy's level 5 fairy was severely injured, while they had the second Lord, who was a level 5 fairy, and a level 4 fairy who was being controlled. It would be easy for them to kill the enemy. Kill! Amidst the angry roars, the two parties collided. The soldiers were defeated like a landslide. The two parties' strengths were reversed, and the battle ended quickly. The remaining soldiers of the enemy, including the remnants of the invincible Black Army, were all annihilated. The fifth Saint Master's hair was disheveled, and his mouth was full of blood. He looked extremely ferocious. Apart from the wound on his chest, there were many other places that were heavily injured. The vital energy in his body was in chaos, and it was leaking out uncontrollably. He was on his last breath. Under the combined attacks of the two parties, the fifth Saint Master was on his last breath. He was only a moment away from death. On the other hand, the second Lord of the Seven Lords' palace was severely injured, and the fourth Lord, who was being controlled, was barely alive. The casualties were extremely heavy. As expected of the fifth Saint Master, the second Lord coughed heavily. He could not hide the shock in his eyes. They were outnumbered, but they had still been severely injured by the fifth Saint Master. But this is the end. Fifth Saint Master. The second Lord gritted his teeth. The fifth Saint Master was already at the end of his rope. He could kill him with his next move. The fifth Saint Master's body swayed slightly. Under his disheveled hair was a pair of blood-red eyes. He looked at the people of the Jinlong continent from afar, then fixed his gaze on the sixth Saint Master, who was being controlled. He said hatefully, "I was a famous Saint Master, but now I am in such a sorry state. I was defeated, not by you, but by that brat's evil plan. Even if I become a ghost, I will not let him go." With a furious roar, the fifth Saint Master looked in the direction Suyu was heading and chased after him. It seemed like he wanted to kill Suyu with him. "Stop him!" the Great Lord shouted in a low voice. Immediately, the second Lord and the others tried to stop him. The fifth Saint Master turned around and looked into the distance. His eyes were filled with madness. "Scram! You're just a bunch of ants." He spat out a cloud of blood, which turned into a pair of bat-shaped wings. He then stuck them on both sides of his body and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After all, the fifth Saint Master was a great army from Jiuzhou, and he had the ability to escape. Naturally, the Jinlong continent could not compare to him. The second Lord and the others could not catch up with him, so they lost sight of him. Chapter 696. The 2015 Elimination of Pornography and Illegal Publications campaign is in progress. The Yuewin Group will cooperate with the relevant departments and submit information. Please be careful when you write. Don't let the other party escape. While the Great Lord was furious, he couldn't help but mock himself. We are really a bunch of trash. Suyu had created such a perfect situation, yet he still couldn't stop the fifth Saint Master. This made all of them feel ashamed to face Suyu. At the end of the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds, the colorful crack was becoming more and more dazzling. A middle-aged man in a black robe was standing at the side of the crack. It was the fourth Saint Master. "My lord, we have followed your instructions and seized enough life force. We can start to expand the crack to accommodate the almighty divine masters." The middle-aged man in the black robe reported carefully to the crack. The crack connected the Jinlong continent and Jiuzhou. It had been 3 years, but only fairies had come. The reason was that the passage couldn't accommodate creatures that were too strong. It was just like how the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion couldn't accommodate creatures that were above the fairy realm. "You have done well. You have filled the Jinlong continent with the deadly energy that devours life force and secretly seized the life force of weaker creatures. You have used their life force to expand the passage between the two worlds." Although the people of the Jinlong continent had sensed the strange aura that devoured life force, they didn't know what it was for. "My lord, I am flattered," the middle-aged man in the black robe said carefully. "Well, thank you for your hard work. Next, we will leave it to the almighty divine masters as the vanguard. You have already tested the Jiuzhou Emperor's limits. If I'm not mistaken, he is less than 1/10 of his power. Thus, the almighty divine masters should be more than enough to deal with him." So far, all of the otherworldly people who had come to the Jinlong continent were only the vanguard. The real otherworldly strong men hadn't come yet. Their purpose was clear. They wanted to test the Jiuzhou Emperor. Even though the Jinlong continent had fallen, the Jiuzhou Emperor still hadn't made a move. It could be seen that he couldn't even take care of himself. "I will do anything for the sake of my king's reign," the fourth Saint Master said respectfully. The other side of the crack regained its silence. After a while, the crack's colorful light became even brighter, illuminating the dark abyss. However, for the people of the Jinlong continent, once the crack opened, the Jinlong continent would fall into darkness. Suddenly, a clear and low voice echoed in the empty space. "So that's how it is." The fourth Saint Master's eyelids fluttered as he gazed into the darkness. In the dark pizza, a thin figure walked over at a moderate pace. His face was handsome, and he didn't look like someone from the mortal world. His bright eyes were like the vast starry sky, cold, deep, dazzling, and emitting a deep light. He was dressed in a simple white robe, without a speck of dust. His silver hair was like a waterfall cascading down his back. In the chilly wind, his white robes fluttered and his silver hair danced. It was as if an immortal was walking over, its expression exceptionally dazzling. The fourth Saint Master's pupils contracted as he asked, "What did you hear?" Suyu walked over with his hands clasped behind his back. He had a leisurely smile on his face. "I have heard what I should and shouldn't have heard. It seems like I am not too late." If he had not heard it with his own ears, Suyu would have found it hard to believe that the Jinlong continent was going through such a calamity only because of the vanguard. None of the divine masters who had truly attacked had shown themselves. "Divine Master," Lu Chuyi's figure flashed through Suyu's mind. Facing such an absolute suppression, Suyu's heart shivered, and his eyes shone with a cold light. He definitely could not let any divine master go. Otherwise, the Jinlong continent would definitely perish. "Did you see through my plan of delaying from the start?" The fourth Saint Master's face darkened. "I advise you not to waste your energy. The fissure has already started to widen, and no one can stop it." Suyu glanced at the colorful fissure and said with a faint smile, "Is that so? If that is the case, why did you come back quietly to guard this place?" "I think that the fissure is at its most unstable during the widening process." The fourth Saint Master clearly had the ability to kill all of them, but he still had to carefully guard this fissure. It was obvious that this fissure was at its most fragile stage, and even a low-level martial artist could easily destroy it. "You will have to get closer first." The fourth Saint Master revealed a murderous look. Suyu's smile deepened. He had guessed correctly. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Suddenly, the colorful light screen trembled slightly, and a voice could be heard from it. "Fourth Saint Master, who is he?" It was the person who had spoken to him earlier. "My lord, he is the leader of one of the continent's forces. He has annihilated the invincible Black Army and the other lords. They all died at his hands one after another." The fourth Saint Master replied respectfully. "Oh, kill him immediately." Don't delay this important matter. I will immediately send the third Saint Master over." Hearing this, the fourth Saint Master slightly furrowed his brows. "I can deal with this person. Your great lord couldn't even last 3 moves against me. I don't know where you get your confidence from to fight me," the fourth Saint Master said calmly. The fourth Saint Master said calmly as he raised his hand and waved it in front of him. "Soul, extinguishing divine light." As he spoke, a palm-sized golden shield appeared in his hand. But right after that, the shield suddenly expanded, forming an incomparably huge light screen that pushed forward horizontally. Wherever the light screen passed, it destroyed everything in its path. Everything that came into contact with the light screen was crushed into pieces. Anyone below my level of cultivation will definitely die. This light screen is meant for group battles, but in order to keep a fly like you away from the fissure, I have to do this. The fourth Saint Master stood with one hand behind his back. Wherever the light screen passed, Suyu could only retreat. However, what surprised the fourth Saint Master was that Suyu didn't retreat. Instead, he leisurely took out a small puppet from his sleeve. The puppet emitted a dark luster, and it was shaped like a dog. The fourth Saint Master was slightly startled. All of a sudden, the person in the fissure was shocked. Fourth Saint Master, retreat. This is a mechanical puppet, a puppet that possesses the power of a middle-stage fairy. His words were filled with surprise, shock, and deep worry. Fourth Saint Master, you have really provoked a powerful person. If I remember correctly, only Yu Qiuhong can create such a puppet. Yet, you, a person of the Jinlong, possess such a thing. This reminds me of a person who was rewarded by Old Monster Yu in the mysterious Heavenly Divine Pavilion. It is also rumored that this person killed a descending Divine Master. Boom! The fourth Saint Master's expression changed drastically, as if he had been struck by lightning. The rumors about Su Yu were not a secret in the Central Prefecture Army, and the information about him was very detailed. However, the fourth Saint Master had never seen his true appearance before. Now that he had seen Su Yu's face, the fourth Saint Master's heart started beating wildly, and his face turned pale. It was as if the weak little rabbit in front of him had suddenly turned into a ferocious tiger. Su Yu smiled. Although it was a calm smile, the fourth Saint Master's heart skipped a beat. After he finished speaking, he threw the small dog puppet to the ground. Its dull eyes suddenly turned red, and it looked extremely ferocious. Su Yu glanced at the small dog puppet and discovered that it had the soul of a powerful, demonic beast sealed within it. Only then could he activate the puppet and display its fighting power. Roar! With a furious roar, the small dog puppet opened its mouth and spat out a blood-red light beam, which swept across the giant light screen that covered the sky. Crack! In an instant, the light screen that was suppressing everything was shattered. The fourth Saint Master groaned, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His pupils shrank as he stared at the small dog puppet, his eyes filled with fear. Destroy him. So you did not even turn his head. He pointed at the fourth Saint Master and strode towards the fissure. Ha! If you want to come to the Jinlong continent, you should have asked me first. Chapter 697. The 2015 Elimination of Pornography and Illegal Publications campaign is currently in progress. The Yuewin Group will actively cooperate with the relevant departments and submit information. Authors, please be vigilant when writing. Do not violate any rules and regulations. Just as he finished speaking, the puppet dog looked at the fourth Saint Master ferociously, and a blood-red beam of light swept across him. The fourth Saint Master was shocked, and he immediately used his vital energy to protect his body. At the same time, he condensed a yellow shield in his palm. Bang! Wherever the blood-red beam of light swept, everything was destroyed. It was extremely powerful. When the beam of light hit the yellow shield, it shattered it. The fourth Saint Master groaned, and blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. He had been injured by the shockwave. According to Yu Qiuhong, the puppet could deal with middle-stage fairies, so the fourth Saint Master was naturally within its range. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Su Yu stepped in front of the fissure. Using his soul eyes, he saw that the fissure was dark and chaotic. A large amount of deadly energy, which contained life force, entered the fissure. Using the seized life force as energy, the space tunnel was forcefully expanded. A space fissure? Suyu nodded slowly, as he understood what it meant. At this moment, the space was in a state of expansion. Hence, the space energy was chaotic, and it feared external interference the most. As long as the transfer of life force was blocked, the fissure would stop expanding and collapse. Even a junior of the Dragon Realm could do this, let alone Suyu. It was no wonder that the fourth Saint Master gave up on his own people and chose to come back to defend himself. Fourth Saint Master, stop him immediately. Give me 3 breaths time. The other side of the fissure hurriedly ordered as it sensed the danger. The fourth Saint Master was in a dilemma. He could barely take care of himself in front of the puppet, so how could he spare any time? He watched as Suyu struck the fissure with his palm, destroying the Central Prefecture's king's 3-year plan. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard from afar. It was accompanied by an angry roar. "Suyu, I will take you down with me." His words were filled with hatred and determination to die. Absolute. Heavens. God. Palm. Along with the angry roar, a sonorous voice could be heard. Suyu suddenly turned around, his heart beating wildly. He felt an unprecedented sense of crisis. As he focused his eyes, a bright moon gradually appeared in the dark sky. The bright moon shone upon the world. It was as if this bright moon had replaced the blazing sun, becoming the only light in the world. Enveloped by the moonlight, Suyu's heart thumped wildly. He felt as if his entire body was about to collapse, as if he was about to melt into the moonlight. The heaven-extinguishing divine palm is the ultimate skill of the bright light guards. Suyu's heart trembled as he recalled what Wuhan had said. The scarred palm prints that covered the entire Jinlong continent, the palm prints that destroyed many civilizations, and mysterious and unfathomable ancient palm prints were all from the heaven-extinguishing palm. The fifth Saint Master was the only Black Shadow Guard who had gotten a glimpse of the heaven-extinguishing divine palm, and it was rumored that when he used this technique, he would be able to fight against a level 9 fairy. The bright moon that obliterated the darkness deeply demonstrated its power. However, for some unknown reason, when Suyu felt the danger, his mind was unusually empty. It was as if he was immersed in some kind of mysterious law. Traces of comprehension appeared in Xiao Chen's heart. Slowly raising his hand, Suyu's eyes were slightly dazed. Threads of weak moonlight drilled out from his palm and gradually grew stronger. A moment later, a ball of light the size of an egg condensed in his palm. The hazy moonlight illuminated Suyu's handsome face, making him look like a bright moon in his palm. The fourth Saint Master, who was observing this scene from a close distance, was shocked. The first move of the heaven-extinguishing divine palm, the great moon palm. His face looked as if he had seen a ghost, and he was extremely shocked. "Who are you? Why are you so proficient in the ultimate skill of the Central Prefecture Bright Light Guards?" His heart was filled with unprecedented shock. Suyu muttered in his heart, "So, the nameless seal art is the heaven-extinguishing divine palm? Does this mean that Elder Jio's true identity is actually a bright light guard of the Central Prefecture?" Suyu's mind became even clearer as these thoughts flashed through his mind. The inspiration that had flashed through his mind when he had comprehended this technique became clear once again. The great moon was the moon of heaven and earth. It was born from the darkness after sunset, and it shone in the lonely night sky. It carried the light of the sun, and it continued to illuminate the world in darkness. All living creatures were illuminated by it. The great moon palm was a dark moon in his palm, and no one dared to disobey it. As his thoughts became clearer, the bright moon in Suyu's palm became even brighter and bigger. It was as big as an egg, and it gradually became as big as a mountain. Gradually, Suyu's whole body merged with the bright moon. It was as if he was the moon in the dark night. A person is like the great moon, and the great moon is like a person. So this is how it is? Suyu muttered softly. He suddenly felt relieved, but he also felt even more puzzled. Although he had understood some things, he still did not understand many things. At this moment, the heaven and earth were facing each other, and the two bright moons were reflecting each other's brilliance, illuminating the sky. The fourth Saint Master was even more shocked. What a terrifying level of comprehension. In such a short time, he managed to comprehend the basics of the fifth Saint Master's technique. At first glance, the heaven and earth were very close in size. You used my comprehension of the heaven extinguishing divine palm. The fifth Saint Master roared angrily, and he attacked Su Yu with an absolute power. From afar, it looked like one bright moon was crazily colliding with the other. Rumble. Amidst the turbulent air currents and boundless energy, the two bright moons collided and were in a deadlock. However, the outcome was shocking. The bright moon that the fifth Saint Master had turned into was instantly destroyed, revealing his falling body. Under the illumination of the moonlight, his body melted inch by inch. His shocked face was still filled with disbelief. How is this possible? The last thing that was reflected in the fifth Saint Master's eyes was the complete moon. Within the moon, a silver-haired youth had lowered his head and was deep in thought. The bright moon behind him suddenly increased in size, and it was now even larger than his own. After studying for so many years, he could not even compare to a youth who had comprehended it on the spot. Even if he died, he would never be able to rest in peace. It's still not enough, Su Yu muttered, as he was deeply immersed in his comprehension. The inspiration just now was only enough for him to comprehend the basics of the Great Moon Palm. He had not completely comprehended the true Great Moon Palm. If only someone could use it again. Su Yu felt regret in his heart, and he slowly stopped comprehending it. Now, without relying on the divine nine-dragon cauldron, and without relying on the passage of time, his level of comprehension had reached an astonishing level. With regret in his eyes, Su Yu glanced at the fifth Saint Master, who had turned into dust, and calmly smiled. Thank you. Even before his death, the fifth Saint Master had still traveled thousands of miles to help Su Yu comprehend the remnant scroll of the fairy-level cultivation technique. Such kindness was worthy of Su Yu's thanks. As he looked at the youth with the bright moon in the sky, the fourth Saint Master felt a chill run down his spine. It was not the power of the palm, but the youth's potential. Thinking back to the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, where the youth had killed the divine master's clone, the fourth Saint Master was terrified. He had not expected to have provoked such a powerful existence. The moonlight around Su Yu dissipated, and he returned to normal. Without any hesitation, he stepped toward the fissure. However, when he was 100 feet away from the fissure, he suddenly stopped. 3 breaths have already passed. Am I too late? Su Yu sighed softly. Buzz! The multicolored light screen trembled, and a black figure stepped out from it. He was dressed in black, and his hair was as black as ink. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his eyes were as cold as the winter snow. As soon as he appeared, the surrounding temperature dropped to the freezing point. Black snowflakes even fell from the sky. The coldness was so cold that even his soul could feel it. The ice path. So he was not unfamiliar with it. He had once walked the ice path, and he had cultivated the ice origin to its peak. However, the coldness that this person emitted was far stronger than the ice origin. The ice origin is not the end of the ice path. Su Yu stroked his chest, and his heart, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly started beating. In the JoJo world, there was still a path to walk on the ice path. Welcome, third Saint Master. The fourth Saint Master was ecstatic. Fortunately, the fifth Saint Master had fought with his life, and he had delayed the third Saint Master for 3 breaths of time. The third Saint Master was a level 7 fairy, and he belonged to the later stage of the fairy realm. He alone could change the outcome of the battle. As he spoke, the puppy puppet shot out a blood-red beam of light again. The fourth Saint Master resisted, his eyes filled with fear. Crack! However, strangely, the blood-red beam of light froze in midair. Looking at it, the surface of the blood-red beam of light was covered with a layer of frost. The beam of light, which was in a state of energy, had been frozen into ice. The puppy puppet's body was frozen, and its soul was not spared either. Suyu stared at the third Saint Master, who did not say a word. At this moment, he slowly retracted one of his fingers. It was him who had destroyed the puppy puppet with a single finger. "If you want to kill him, you have to ask me first," the third Saint Master said. His voice was as cold as the wind. As he spoke, ice shards fell from the sky. Even Suyu's ears were covered by the ice. The fourth Saint Master, who had been saved, was overjoyed. He rushed to the third Saint Master's side. Suyu was expressionless. "Is that so?" After he spoke, he shook his sleeves, and a black shadow the size of a palm flew out. It had 8 legs and a ferocious body. It was a spider. However, the ferocious aura it emitted was more than 10 times stronger than the puppy puppets. A puppet of the later stage of the fairy realm? The third Saint Master raised his eyebrows and rushed toward the fourth Saint Master. However, when a spider puppet landed on the ground, it spat out a white thread from its mouth. The thread was as fast as light. The fourth Saint Master did not even have time to react before the thread wrapped around his waist and pulled him to the side of the spider. Shortly after, the spider's fangs quickly pierced into the fourth Saint Master's body. The fourth Saint Master cried out in shock and hurriedly used his vital energy to protect his body. However, the pair of fangs were extremely sharp. They completely ignored the vital energy and pierced into his body. With a horrible shriek, the fourth Saint Master's whole body turned black. His whole body twitched, and his eyes quickly dimmed. His life was draining away in the blink of an eye. A dignified, level 6 fairy had died from poison in a single breath. Suyu calmly retracted his gaze and fixed it on the third Saint Master. "With or without you, he cannot escape death. Old monster you." The third Saint Master's eyes shone with a cold light. He had not forgotten that Yu Qiuhong had given Suyu not only the puppy puppet, but also an even more terrifying spider puppet, which was powerful enough to kill a later stage fairy. "It's your turn now." Suyu's eyes shone with a cold light as he pointed at the third Saint Master. The survival of the continent depended on this one move. Suyu took out all of the trump cards that he could use without holding back. "I was prepared for this." The third Saint Master looked at Suyu coldly. His eyes were filled with pity and cruelty. "It's over, Suyu." Since the Central Prefecture's guards already knew that they were facing Suyu, they naturally knew that Suyu had not only the puppy puppet, but also the even more terrifying spider puppet. How could the third Saint Master be unprepared? He reached into his bosom and took out a dark red clay jar. The inside of the jar was filled with a ferocious aura and was extremely bloody. Bang! The clay jar fell to the ground, and viscous blood splattered everywhere. Shortly after, the blood wriggled on its own and gathered together to form a centipede that was 10 feet thick. Chapter 698. The 2015 Elimination of Pornography and Illegal Publications campaign is in progress. The Yuewin Group will cooperate with the relevant departments and submit information. Please be careful when you write. Do not let Suyu's mind roar. Pearl Scales Blood Centipede. Back when he had fought Xue Wu, he had released the Pearl Scales Blood Centipede. In the end, the Pearl Scales Blood Centipede had been captured by a mysterious person and almost killed Suyu. That terrifying existence still lingered in Suyu's heart and could not be erased. Now, the Pearl Scales Blood Centipede had reappeared. Moreover, its aura was many times stronger than before. Suyu could feel traces of an ancient aura from its body. As he looked at it, there seemed to be a very weak blood within the Pearl Scales Blood Centipede's body. The great Saint Master personally nurtured the ancient spiritual worm and imbued it with a trace of the rare real spirit bloodline. Your puppet may not be its match. The third Saint Master was as cold as ice. Great Saint Master? Suyu's gaze turned serious. Who is your great Saint Master? The one who had captured the Pearl Scales Blood Centipede must have been the great Saint Master. This meant that the great Saint Master was already in the Jinlong continent. This news was as shocking as thunder, and it shook Suyu's heart. However, if that was the case, why had Suyu not appeared when he was trying to restore the Jinlong continent? Now that the Central Prefecture's success or failure was at stake, why had he not appeared? Could it be that he was afraid? Was he afraid that once he appeared, the Jojo Emperor would come for him? Su Yu's eyes shone with understanding. The third Saint Master spat out a cold wind. The great Saint Master is elusive, and we have never seen his true appearance. If you want to know, you'll have to die first. Go. With the order, the Pearl Scale's blood centipede spat out a blood-red gas. Its ferocious gaze shone as it locked onto the spider puppet. The spider puppet was not willing to be left behind. It moved its 8 legs and quickly swam towards its opponent. A spider and a centipede. The two ferocious creatures collided. The Pearl Scale's blood centipede had a huge body, while the spider puppet was small and nimble. Both of them contained unique poisons, and they were evenly matched. Without the puppet, I want to see what other tricks the young king, who killed the Divine Master's clone, has up his sleeve. The third Saint Master stepped forward. With every step he took, ice splashed out from under his feet, and the ground creaked under his feet. With him, as the center, a thick layer of ice had already formed on the ground within 10 meters. So he was a grade 7 fairy, was a later stage fairy. Unlike the Divine Master's clone in the mysterious Heavenly Divine Pavilion, the fairy in front of him was a later stage fairy. Su Yu remained calm and composed as he felt the chilling intent. The more dangerous the situation was, the calmer he became. Whoosh! Golden light flickered in his palm, and a small golden sword hovered in his palm. He flicked his wrist and threw the small sword at the third Saint Master. The 3 Saint Masters looked straight ahead and ignored him. Crack! When the small golden sword was 30 feet away, it suddenly froze and fell to the ground, covered in ice. However, the space behind the 3 holy masters suddenly fluctuated, and a small golden sword appeared 20 feet away from them. However, as soon as it appeared, it immediately turned into ice. In the blink of an eye, the 2 semi-manufactured spirit artifacts were frozen solid. Not a single hair of the enemy was harmed. The third Saint Master coldly said, "You actually used such a lowly trick to deal with me. I really doubt whether you are really the young king who killed the Divine Master's clone." In a battle between strong martial artists, such tricks were useless. Su Yu was not affected by the third Saint Master's mockery. His expression was calm and collected. 30 feet is your killing range, and 20 feet is your strongest defense range. In other words, if I want to kill you, I need to break through the 20 feet range. Otherwise, I will be frozen by the cold energy. When he heard this, the third Saint Master's cold eyes twitched and his brows furrowed. He glanced at the 2 semi-manufactured spirit artifacts that had fallen to the ground and became slightly wary. So that's how it is. Were the 2 small swords just to test the strength of my cold energy? The first one was to test the range of my cold energy, and the second one was to test the limit of my defense. At that moment, his gaze turned serious. This is the silver-haired genius that I know. But so what? I seal. The third Saint Master extended his index finger and pointed it at Su Yu. At that moment, the surrounding cold energy seemed to have received an order and gathered around Su Yu's body quickly. The air, spirit energy, dust, and the ground were all frozen. The third Saint Master wanted to completely seal Su Yu and the space around him in ice. Su Yu's brows twitched, and his entire body became extremely cold. Ice could be seen spreading on the surface of his body, and it was gradually condensing inside his body. The ice origin that he had cultivated was not worth mentioning in front of the cold energy. In an instant, he would be frozen and turned into an ice sculpture. His life force would be cut off. Su Yu immediately took out the Red Lotus Incredible Umbrella and released the Red Lotus Angry Flame. The flame enveloped his body and expelled the cold energy. However, at that moment, the flame was also frozen and kept burning. It was as if it had been frozen. It was extremely strange. It's useless. My ice path has already surpassed the origin, so ordinary flames are useless against it. The third Saint Master shook his head calmly. In his eyes, Su Yu was already a corpse. However, his pupils shrank shortly after. He saw Su Yu take out a black flame with great difficulty. It was very weak, and it was almost non-existent. As soon as it appeared, It seemed as if the world was boiling. The cold energy that was approaching Su Yu evaporated completely, leaving nothing behind. Disastrous fire? The third Saint Master's brows twitched, and fear appeared on his face for the first time. You are indeed qualified to kill the Divine Master's clone. You even have a trace of disastrous fire. Su Yu smiled calmly. You are correct. This trace of disastrous fire was originally meant for the fourth Saint Master. Since you have encountered it, I will give it to you. As he smiled, Su Yu's gaze suddenly turned sharp. He flicked his finger and shot the disastrous fire at the third Saint Master. The third Saint Master's expression turned grave as he sensed the danger. He shouted in a low voice, "Dual cold sun technique." Creak! 2 icy halos appeared 30 feet around him, emitting a terrifying chill. The chill in the ice seal was on a completely different level compared to the 2 icy halos. 30 feet was indeed a sure kill range. The outermost icy halo was a sure kill range. The innermost icy halo was the bottom line of defense. With such a terrifying chill, even a level 7 fairy would be instantly killed by the extreme cold if he came within 30 feet of the third Saint Master. As the disastrous fire flew over, the cold energy along the way quickly dissipated. Only the 2 icy halos remained unchanged. Creak! When the disastrous fire collided with the first icy halo, it only made a small dent in it before it was annihilated by the cold energy. The 2 icy halos complemented each other, and their defense was frightening. The third Saint Master's face was as cold as ice. He felt as if he had just survived a disaster. Facing the disastrous fire just now, he felt as if his body was burning. Fortunately, the 2 icy halos contained more than half of his cold energy. When they merged into one, their defense was astonishing, and they were able to block the disastrous fire. He raised his head again and looked at Su Yu. His gaze was unusually cold. I was careless. Against you, I really cannot hold back. Everything ends here. The third Saint Master was afraid of Su Yu, so he didn't hold back anymore. He shouted in a deep voice, and the outermost layer of the 3 rings of ice around him suddenly left the third Saint Master's body and turned into a giant arc that swept toward Su Yu. Everything, including Su Yu, was enveloped by it. Wherever the arc passed, everything turned into icicles. The third Saint Master wanted to use his ultimate move to completely kill Su Yu. He would not give Su Yu any chance to retaliate. The scene just now had truly frightened him. Before the arc of ice even got close to him, Su Yu felt as if he was about to be sealed in ice forever and become a dead object. The great danger made Su Yu's heart beat faster. However, he did not show any fear on his face. Instead, he smiled faintly and took out a black scroll. I have more than that disastrous fire. Su Yu smiled calmly. He used his strength to tear open the scroll that had been silent for a long time. Boom! As if it had been suppressed for a long time, a wave of black flames rushed out from the scroll and rolled in all directions. The surrounding temperature suddenly increased by several times. The entire dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds seemed to be boiling, and the ice that filled the sky was shattered. The frightening icy halo was forcibly swept away by the black wave. What? You still have so many disastrous fires? The Third Lord's face turned pale with fright as he frantically retreated. He could feel the rapidly approaching black tribulation flames, and his face was filled with disbelief. You were just a junior. How did you manage to store so much tribulation flames? Even a divine master wouldn't be able to store so much tribulation flames. It was difficult to collect disastrous fires, and it was even more difficult to store them. How many items in the world could withstand being burned by disastrous fires day and night? The third Saint Master was surprised that Su Yu had taken out a small amount of disastrous fires. How could he have expected that Su Yu had stored so many of them? If he knew that the current tribulation fire was the last remaining tribulation fire in the Great Sun Punishment Immortal painting, how would he feel? The wave of black flames broke through the icy halo and headed straight for the third Saint Master. The remaining icy halo around him trembled slightly in the terrifying disastrous fires. It was on the verge of being destroyed. Lad, you tricked me. Suyu clearly had such a large amount of disastrous fires, but he had hidden them and deliberately released a small amount of them to force the third Saint Master to use his trump card. Originally, the two icy halos together might have been able to block the flames. However, now that they had been separated, they had lost their defensive power. Suyu smiled but did not say anything. He held the black scroll in his hand and sighed in his heart. He had lost another trump card. Now all that was left was the empty black scroll. In order to kill this person and completely end the Jinlong War, Suyu had sacrificed a lot. Of the two puppets, the final tribulation flame, everything that could be used had been used. Bang! All of a sudden, a loud noise could be heard. When Suyu looked over, he saw that the third Saint Master was holding a jade cat demon. Suyu was very familiar with this cat demon. When Gu Taishu had suffered a fatal blow from Suyu, he had used this item to take the hit. He had used it to take the hit and remained unscathed. Now that the third Saint Master had a heavy responsibility to protect the crevice, the Central Prefecture's king would not be stingy with this life-saving treasure. Crack! As the disastrous fires gradually dissipated and the high temperature subsided, the Jade Cat demon in the third Saint Master's hand shattered. Deep fear and anger lingered in his eyes. Suyu, you. The third Saint Master glared at Suyu coldly. I want to see what other tricks you have up your sleeve. Creak. Another ice fox shot out from his body and swept toward Suyu. Without the disastrous fires, how could Suyu resist the terrifying chill? Chapter 699. The 2015 Elimination of Pornography and Illegal Publications campaign is in progress, and the Yuewen Group will cooperate with the relevant departments to submit information. However, the light screen of the crack is gradually stabilizing, which means that the crack is about to widen. What awaits the Jinlong continent is the arrival of the Divine Masters. When that time comes, there will be no escape. At that moment, an old laugh sounded from the dark horizon behind Suyu. Lad, you have exceeded my expectations. Leave the rest to me. A familiar voice echoed in Suyu's ears. Elder Gio? Suyu raised his eyebrows. Elder Gio had left a message saying that he had gone to the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds. Suyu had not seen him all this time, so he had some doubts. He did not expect that Elder Gio would appear at the last moment. Also, didn't you want to see the heaven-extinguishing divine palm again? Watch carefully. After Elder Gio finished speaking, a bright moon rose from the dark horizon. The moonlight was not only dazzling, but it was also dazzling. It was as bright as the sun. The whole dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds was brightly lit. The intense moonlight rushed out of the dragon abyss and into the sky. From afar, a giant beam of light shot out of the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds. This is the great Een Palm. Suyu was shocked beyond words. Although they were both using the great Een Palm, his moon was only the size of a small mountain. However, Elder Gio's moon was so huge that it could not be measured. It was as if the real moon had descended. Compared to Elder Gio's great Een Palm, Suyu's and the 5th Saint Master's great Een Palm were like child's play. Suyu's mind was filled with inspiration. He immediately sat cross-legged on the ground and digested the technique in his mind. The great Een Palm's peak? Who are you? The 3rd Saint Master was shocked and shocked. Elder Gio's voice was faintly discernible. You don't need to know. Let me see how many life-saving treasures the Central Prefecture's government has given you. With a light shout, the bright moon fell, melting everything. Crack! A cracking sound came from the 3rd Saint Master's chest. This time, it was a jade pendant that broke. Blood flowed out of the 3rd Saint Master's mouth, and his eyes were filled with shock. He took out the broken jade pendant from his chest. His face was filled with fear. Floating crest jade pendant. Is it a heaven-defying jade pendant that can instantly replenish one's vitality? When the moonlight disappeared, Elder Gio, who was standing in the air with his hands clasped behind his back, said sarcastically, "The Central Prefecture's king isn't stingy." The 3rd Saint Master was shocked beyond words, and he asked solemnly, "Senior, may I ask who you are? Why are you so proficient in the Bright Light Guard's ultimate skill?" Elder Gio chuckled calmly as he cast a glance at Suyu, who was meditating attentively. He then chuckled in a hoarse voice. Our identities are already in the past. So, are you prepared to take my next few moves? Elder Geo extended his palm and condensed the rising sun's radiance. The third sacred master was unable to describe the fear in his heart. The second move, the great sun palm. Crack! Amidst the sunlight that filled the sky, the cold air around the three Saint Masters was completely defenseless, and it instantly dissipated. They coughed up blood and retreated madly. A jade bracelet on his arm shattered soundlessly. Hee, the third life-saving talisman. You have already used it, haven't you? Elder Geo chuckled and walked over with his hands clasped behind his back. The third Saint Master's face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Senior, please wait for a moment. However, Elder Geo didn't reply to him. Instead, he stretched out both of his hands. His left palm was a bright moon, while his right palm was a sun. The last move, light, Ming, God, palm, in the bright light guards. Only the three great divine guards have successfully cultivated it. The third Saint Master was so shocked that he was at a loss for words. He even felt like he was going crazy. Who are you? What answered him was the exchange of the sun and the moon. As a cracking sound echoed out, it seemed like something in the third Saint Master's body had been shattered. He was heavily injured, and he was in a semi-conscious state. Oh, he gave you 4 life-saving treasures in a row. The Central Prefecture's king really put in a lot of effort in order to get rid of the Jojo Emperor. Elder Geo mocked him as he glanced at the third Saint Master, who was unable to fight anymore. He then floated to Su Yu's side. At this moment, Su Yu had just woken up from his comprehension, and his eyes were filled with delight. However, he still had many doubts. In the martial path, after you solve all your doubts, there will be even more doubts. As martial artists, we will spend our whole lives searching for the limits of the martial path. This is our undying belief. Elder Geo's voice was unfathomable, and he had the demeanor of a peerless expert. Su Yu calmed down and agreed with him. He looked at Elder Geo with a gaze filled with respect. This was because he had helped him in the past, and also because he had taught him the heaven-extinguishing divine palm. I have already demonstrated the 3 moves. How far you can comprehend them in the future will depend on your own comprehension and luck, Elder Geo said as he looked at the fisher. Su Yu nodded. Senior, thank you for your guidance. I will remember it in my heart. Elder Geo shook his head, then waved his finger at the air and took out a mass of black death energy. Now, we should quickly deal with this fissure. It seems like it will widen completely in less than half a day, and it will be able to accommodate the arrival of divine masters. The death energy in the world has already started to fade. Su Yu's heart shuddered, and his gaze became ice cold. Stay here, and let me use my vital energy to seal the fissure. Once the fissure loses its life force, it will collapse on its own. Then, the passage between the Jinlong continent and Jiuzhou will be completely severed. Elder Geo walked forward and gathered his vital energy in his palm. He then pressed it against the multicolored light screen. Su Yu heaved a long sigh of relief. After going through so much trouble, he had finally succeeded. However, all of a sudden, Su Yu felt a chill run down his spine, as if he had just been swept by something terrifying. Elder Geo's expression changed drastically. His body seemed to have been struck by something, and he was sent flying. A mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth, and he was clearly heavily injured. As Elder Geo was sent flying, he stared at the fissure in shock. You want to cross the border and come here? Jiu Yuan Zhou, one of the 3 strongest divine guards of the Bright Light Guards. I haven't seen you for many years, and your power has declined greatly. It seems like your betrayal in the past didn't bring you any benefits. An indescribable sigh came from the fissure. When the sigh entered Su Yu's ears, his whole body shuddered, and even his soul shook. The divine 9-dragon cauldron, which was in the depths of his soul, trembled slightly, and his restless soul gradually calmed down. Su Yu's expression became unsightly. Just a glance from the other party had caused his whole body to shiver. Just a single sentence from the other party had caused his soul to feel extremely restless. Moreover, just a single glance from the other party had heavily injured Elder Geo and sent him flying. Just how powerful was this person? Suyu had seen a divine master attack before, and even Lu Chui, a middle-stage divine master, didn't possess such a terrifying power. After Suyu came back to his senses, he flew over to support Elder Gio. Elder Gio, how are your injuries? Elder Gio waved his hand at him and struggled to stand up. His eyes were fixed on the fissure as he said, Blood Emperor. It's him. Blood Emperor. When Suyu heard this name once again, his mind shuddered. Tianjizi's last words stated that one of the conditions for obtaining his Emperor-based Saint artifact was to take revenge for him, and his target was none other than the Blood Emperor, who was from the same faction as him. It was unexpectedly him. The person who killed Tianjizi was also the person who Suyu had to fulfill his oath and kill. According to what Tianjizi had said, the Blood Emperor had already broken through to the all-creation realm. Has he already come here? Suyu's expression became grave as he stared at the multicolored fissure. Elder Gio shook his head. No, he's still crossing the border. Otherwise, I would have been turned into ashes with just a look from him. Even though he was still crossing the border, he possessed such terrifying power. If his true body had come here, wouldn't it have been impossible for him to survive? Chapter 700. I mustn't let him come over. Suyu's eyes were filled with sharpness as he waved his hand. The dry cloud 5 elemental formation appeared and turned into a 4-colored light screen to seal the crack. However, just as it was about to seal the crack, the light screen was instantly shattered. The 4 pearls were scattered everywhere and bounced back at a speed 10 times faster than when they had left. Bang! Bang! For consecutive loud noises echoed as 4 holes appeared where Suyu had been standing. As he supported Elder Gio, Suyu's eyes became serious. When he looked closely, he found that the 4 pearls had been damaged to varying degrees. Just a glance from him had almost destroyed 4 semi-manufactured spiritual artifacts. The Suyu who defeated the Divine Master's clone? He would be considered above average in the Central Prefecture, but it's a pity that he is in a barren land and is destined to be ordinary for the rest of his life. Suyu felt as if a pair of eyes had penetrated through millions of spaces and landed on his body. At that moment, Suyu felt as if his soul was about to be destroyed. This was definitely not a realm that he could deal with. Don't waste your efforts. He has already entered the space channel, and no one can stop him unless he has the power to suppress an all-creation realm expert. He will surely arrive at the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds in less than half an hour. It's too late now. I didn't expect that the Central Prefecture's king would send the Blood Emperor here. It seems like he is willing to sacrifice everything in order to get rid of any future troubles and fight for the Jiuzhou Emperor's throne peacefully. The price to send an all-creation realm expert here is to destroy a fairy artifact and use its power to teleport him here. In order to teleport the Blood Emperor, he had to destroy a fairy artifact. A fairy artifact with a holy artifact that only all-creation old monsters could use. Even in the Jiuzhou world, it was extremely rare. It was as magnificent as the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, and it was also a fairy artifact. The Central Prefecture's king had put in a lot of effort to kill the Jiuzhou Emperor. Run for as long as you can. Since he has appeared in Jinlong, the continent's destruction is imminent. In the past, he destroyed the Jinlong continent with just a palm print. It was the Jiuzhou Emperor who used his flesh and blood to revive the continent. Now, there is no Jiuzhou Emperor who can save the continent. Elder Gio laughed bitterly. Suyu was shocked when he heard this. The true appearance of the Jinlong continent was a giant palm print, which had been created by the first bright light guard, the Blood Emperor. After 100 years, the Blood Emperor's power was far greater than it had been in the past. Suyu did not doubt the mighty power of such an unparalleled almighty. Escape? Suyu let out a bitter smile. He might be able to escape for now, but could he escape the day Blood Emperor arrived? Even if he managed to escape, what about Xiener, Xia Jingyu, the Duke of Xinyu, Zi Donglai, and his daughter, Lin Yunhe, Gang Dalai, and Elder Gio? Watch them turn into ashes, become remnant souls, and become the dust of memories? Then, what was he fighting for until now? Scholarly honors? Lilu? None of them. All he wanted was to return the favor and return the favor. All he wanted was to protect the important people in his life and live an ordinary but magnificent life. Now, because of the arrival of an invincible expert, everything was going to be turned into ashes. Unwillingness, self-blame, and defiance were like a tsunami crashing into his soul. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The colorful light screen was getting more and more intense. Suyu seemed to be able to see a terrifying figure galloping across the starry sky, crossing the boundary at high speed. Suyu's silver hair was fluttering wildly in the darkness, causing it to flutter in a messy and flamboyant manner. Under the cover of the silver hair, a pair of deep eyes could be seen. At this moment, his eyes were filled with an indescribable radiance and coldness. In my whole life, I have been humble and downtrodden, but I have never lowered my head. Defiance is my undying will. Whoever wants to kill me will have to test my might. Swoosh, Suyu put down Elder Geo, then flew toward the crevice like a shooting star, leaving behind a bright afterimage in the night sky. Elder Geo was startled. Stop! You can't block his gaze. Don't throw your life away for nothing. In his old eyes, Suyu's figure was like a moth flying toward him. He was burning his life force to release the brightest radiance in his life. Suyu's eyes were filled with determination. For Siener, for Xia Jingyu, for the Duke of Siener, for all the people he loved and was familiar with, it was worth it. Chapter 701. His fragmentary shadow was like an illusion, and Suyu arrived in front of the crevice in an instant. Dry Cloud 5 Elemental Array. Eternal Stone Armor. 6 Directional Ruler. First Dragon Physique. All kinds of colors blossomed at the same time. Suyu's body shone brightly, almost competing with the colorful light screen. Even so, Suyu could feel that, in front of the approaching aura, all his defenses were as thin as paper. In just a short moment, Suyu threw out countless magical treasures without hesitation and sealed them into the crevice. Talismans, divine artifacts, and even the semi-manufactured spirit artifact, the Purple Sun Profound Umbrella. Everything that contained powerful energy was thrown into the crack. Their collective self-detonation produced a tremendous amount of explosive energy. Even if it couldn't destroy the spatial tunnel, it was enough to produce a powerful impact that cut off the life force that continued to pour in. This way, they could stop the Blood Emperor from descending. Even if he knew it was impossible, he had to give it a try. Commendable courage. The Blood Emperor's majestic voice echoed from a distant place. It was unknown whether he was praising Suyu or mocking him for overestimating himself. As the voice rang out, an invisible gaze pierced through space and shot over. The items and talismans that fell into the fissure instantly turned into nothingness. The exploding divine items and the eruption of energy instantly vanished into thin air. The raging red lotus flames that surged out of the Purple Sun Profound Umbrella were extinguished like a raging wave, leaving not a single trace behind. His gaze shot out of the crack and landed on Suyu's body. Suyu felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and his whole body retreated crazily like Elder Geo. The light barrier of the Dry Cloud 5 Elemental Formation shattered. The Eternal Stone King Armor's barrier of light shattered. His gaze continued to pierce through the gaps in the armor. Clang! The 6 Directional Ruler held on for a moment before it bounced off. Puff! The golden veins of his first dragon physique expanded, but couldn't block the penetrating gaze. In an instant, Suyu's abdomen was pierced through. A long arrow of blood shot out from his back, leaving a long afterimage in the air. Suyu! Elder Geo's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he shouted in alarm. He endured his injuries and flew over to catch Suyu. However, Suyu's body still had an unimaginably great power. When Elder Geo took over, he was also pushed back by this great power. Bang bang. The two of them smashed through several mountains before finally crashing into a huge mountain. Dust filled the air. 2 figures covered in blood were motionless, as if they were dead. Cough cough. After a while, Elder Gio's body trembled slightly as he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Sensing that Su Yu's aura was getting weaker and weaker, Su Yu's heart was filled with grief. Why are you doing this? Even though you know that you will die, you still want to charge forward? He didn't understand. He knew how terrifying the Blood Emperor was and how dangerous it was to stand in front of the crack. Yet he still rushed over and sacrificed himself for nothing. Su Yu's body was severely injured. His 4 limbs were shattered, especially his abdomen, which had been pierced through. Even his dantian was injured. One of his 3 vital energy crystals had turned into dust. At this moment, Su Yu could only move his fingertips. His lips opened and closed, and he revealed a faint smile with great difficulty. It's because the person I love is behind me. Elder Gio's heart trembled, and he felt an indescribable sadness in his heart. Was he willing to sacrifice his life for the lover he had never forgotten? In the past, I heard that this child traveled 1,000 miles to the imperial capital to fight a life and death battle for his father-in-law. For love, to become famous in the Phoenix Cabinet, to break through and become a fairy. But now, for the sake of the vicissitudes of the world, for the sake of righteousness, he was like a moth flying into a flame, fighting against everything. Kindness, affection, and righteousness were the most important in his life. However, such an outstanding person had fallen along with the Jinlong continent, embroiled in an ancient grudge. As Elder Jiu looked at the gradually weakening Su Yu and felt the Blood Emperor approaching him, his eyes became filled with sorrow. Su Yu was finished, and the Jinlong continent was finished. The whole world was finished. Buzz, buzz. The crack's light screen trembled, and the whole dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds trembled. Mountain rocks tumbled down unceasingly, and many terrifying cracks spread across the dragon abyss like a spider's web. Earth fire surged out of the cracks, and it condensed into a scarlet lava that filled the sky. The dragon abyss turned into a sea of flames. Outside the dragon abyss, the sea's waves reached the sky, and a fierce wind blew. Countless powerful sea beasts were fleeing in terror, as if they were facing the end of the world. Black clouds surged in the sky, and the earth was engulfed in darkness. The whole continent was engulfed in dark clouds, and the weather changed drastically. As everyone looked at this strange phenomenon, they were all frightened, and a bad premonition welled up in their hearts. The northern continent, the central continent, the southern continent, the western continent, and the boundless sea, all of the spiritual beings were trembling as they felt a terrifying aura engulfing the Jinlong continent. It was as if a terrifying living being was slowly entering the Jinlong continent from somewhere. At the top of the world's peak of the Empire of Darkness, a handsome middle-aged man, who was wearing a black robe, was standing alone on a cliff overlooking the clouds. His eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were like stars. He was standing still, but he looked down on the world as if he was the most powerful person in the world. As he looked in the direction of the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds, the black-robed, middle-aged man's eyes turned cold, and a sharp light shot out of them. Light splashed everywhere, and the whole world trembled. You have finally come. I have been waiting for you for 10,000 years. The black-robed, middle-aged man said slowly. In the dragon abyss, earth fire was boiling, and the whole world was shaking. Rocks were falling into the lava, and they disappeared. If a person fell into the lava, his corpse would definitely be destroyed. Elder Gio struggled to help Su Yu up. The two of them, who were covered in blood, supported each other and looked at the volcano on the mountain peak. Their gazes pierced through the thick smoke and the blazing flames, and they stared at the crack's light screen. Suddenly, the light screen stopped trembling, the lava stopped boiling, and the falling rocks stopped rolling. It was as if the entire world had gone silent, so silent that not a single sound could be heard. The only thing that could be heard was Su Yu and Elder Gio's breathing. He had come. When Su Yu looked at the light screen with his naked eye, he could vaguely see a black figure. He was majestic and powerful. Even looking at him made one feel suffocated and desperate. Suyu knew that this was a terrifying expert, whose cultivation level was much lower than his. Jinlong, I haven't heard this name for a long time, and I haven't heard this aura for a long time. The majestic figure in the light screen sighed in a low voice. Then he slowly stepped out of the crack. All of a sudden, the whole dragon abyss trembled, and the whole Jinlong continent shook. It was as if they were afraid and couldn't bear it anymore. No matter if it was a mortal or a martial artist, a human or a monster, a high-level creature or a weak ant, all of them felt a sense of dread in their hearts, as if they were about to die. Suyu's gaze suddenly became sharp, and he fixed it on the footprints left by his opponent. He also fixed his gaze on the ground where his foot was about to land. What was difficult to see with the naked eye was that there was a black hair hidden on the ground where his foot was going to land. It was an item that was filled with a terrifying demonic aura, and it could cause anyone's heart to palpitate. This was the item that Suyu had obtained when he killed the demon. It contained a shocking demonic aura, and once it entered one's body, the demonic aura would be able to disturb one's mind and taint one's soul. Even a divine master expert would be killed by it. However, Suyu didn't know whether it would be effective against an all-creation expert. He could only give it a try. Interesting. So it was just a scheme. Suyu's expression stiffened when he saw that the Blood Emperor's foot had suddenly stopped. Just now, when you randomly threw things here, it was just a diversionary tactic, and your true trump card is here. As Suyu chuckled, the devil's hair, which was buried in the ground, came out of the ground. It emitted a black luster, and it was filled with a terrifying demonic aura. The demon of the past was really terrifying, and this hair could even pose a threat to me. It's a pity that you used it inappropriately. After he removed the trap, the Blood Emperor's foot landed on the ground. However, when it was about to touch the ground, it stopped abruptly, and emotions appeared in his mouth for the first time. Well, it's a series of traps. Lad, I really didn't expect that your schemes were so profound. Huh. As a muffled sound echoed, a small black flag slowly floated out of the ground beneath the devil's hair. A big hand stretched out of the light screen and grasped the small black flag. What a terrifying, evil energy. A grave voice could be heard coming from the fissure, and fear could be heard in it. This small flag was the Ice Soul Divine Dream spell, which he had obtained from the mysterious Heavenly Divine Pavilion. It was a famous illusion spell, but Suyu, who had been possessed by the evil god, had modified it and imbued it with a wisp of evil energy. Lad, who gave you this evil energy? The Blood Emperor's voice was grave, and his foot stopped in midair. Suyu's face became pale, as all of his trump cards were seen through. Answer me, who did it? The Blood Emperor swept his gaze over the dragon abyss, as if he was afraid of some hidden enemy. He had misunderstood that there was an unknown and terrifying existence hidden in the Jinlong abyss. Fine, I will know once I probe it. All of a sudden, two beams of light shot out of the fissure. Suyu and Jiu Yuanzhou didn't even have the time to react before they were struck by them. Suyu felt an intense pain in his head, as it seemed like something had just struck the divine nine-dragon cauldron and caused it to tremble slightly. Suyu was overwhelmed with shock, as this was the first time that something had managed to shake the divine nine-dragon cauldron. As he looked at Elder Gio, his consciousness became blurry, as his soul was being invaded. A fairy artifact level soul defense treasure. The Blood Emperor was startled once again, and his voice became gloomy. Great waves were raging in his heart. How could a lad from a trifling wasteland possess a fairy artifact? However, just after this, he chuckled calmly. It turns out that the Jinlong Abyss doesn't have any powerful enemies. Does this mean that the evil energy and the fairy artifact were obtained by you? Elder Gio became clear-headed at this moment, and he cried out in a gloomy voice, You search my soul and search my memories. The two beams of light from a moment ago had been used in such a way, and if he searched Elder Gio's memories, he would know that they had fought to the death, and that they didn't have any powerful enemies. Suyu and Elder Gio both sank into despair. I lost a fairy artifact to cross over to another world, but I still managed to obtain a rare soul defense fairy artifact. It isn't a loss for me. The Blood Emperor chuckled calmly as he looked at Zhu Yuanzhou. I will give you a chance to return to the Bright Light Guard. Kill him and give his corpse to me. You probably want to recover your past cultivation, don't you? Zhu Yuanzhou was one of the Bright Light Guard's 3 strongest guards, so it was easy to guess his past cultivation. At the very least, he was a late-stage divine master. Zhu Yuanzhou's pupils contracted, and a bright glint appeared in his eyes. However, it was extinguished in an instant. I, Zhu Yuanzhou, betrayed the Bright Light Guard, so how can I return to it? Don't tell me that I will follow you and slaughter a whole world's living beings? Zhu Yuanzhou had betrayed the Bright Light Guard because he refused to participate in the destruction of the Jinlong continent. Then, he was almost killed by the Blood Emperor with a single palm strike. Although he managed to survive, his cultivation had fallen to this day. Moreover, Zhu Yuanzhou glared at the Blood Emperor angrily. Moreover, you just played with me and made me kill Su Yu with my own hands. After I kill him, you will immediately kill me. It seemed like the Blood Emperor already knew his answer, and he spoke in an indifferent tone, which contained a faint hint of mockery. You're quite smart. You still remember that I don't accept traitors. Since that's the case, then everything has come to an end. I will personally send you on your way. The Blood Emperor chuckled calmly as he stepped out of the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds. Chapter 702. The Blood Emperor's footsteps stopped abruptly, and a bad premonition filled his heart. However, before he could react, Su Yu shouted in a deep voice, "Little Kylan." Suddenly, a cloud of pink mist appeared in the empty void above the fissure. In the mist, a delicate and adorable Qilin was blinking its big bright eyes mischievously. In its small mouth was a small green bead. The dark green bead suddenly flashed, and a blue and yellow bead fell from it. It was 5 feet in size. His falling speed was abnormally fast, and he appeared abruptly without any warning. The Blood Emperor only had time to take a look before the blue and yellow ball fell. One of his outstretched hands and one of his feet were crushed to the ground with a loud bang. It's the Ghost Festival Great Emperor's Underworld Pearl. The Blood Emperor cried out involuntarily, as if he was extremely frightened. He immediately recognized the pearl. After all, he had personally participated in the Great War between humans and ghosts. He had personally witnessed the terrifying scene of the all-creation's old monsters of the human race being reduced to dust by the Underworld Pearl. Now that the Underworld Pearl had reappeared, how could he not be afraid? By the time he regained his composure, the Underworld Pearl had already smashed down. Bang! The entire dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds trembled, and lava shot up hundreds of meters into the air. The terrifyingly huge force at close range affected the crack. Crack! The widening spatial tunnel that was about to take shape suddenly shattered. The curtain of light shook violently and flickered indeterminately. This was the sign of destruction. The spatial passageway was destroyed. After 3 consecutive designs, he finally succeeded. Even an all-creation's old monster would not be able to come out unscathed in the collapsed space channel. Moreover, one of his hands and one of his feet were pressed outside the crack. Kid, I will make sure that not even your bones remain. The Blood Emperor was finally enraged, and he no longer had the bearing of a sovereign overlooking the world. He roared in anger. As he struggled, half of his body stepped out of the crack. However, little Qilin wrinkled its nose and stepped on his face with its hoof, forcing him back. The Blood Emperor was enraged, and his gaze, which seemed to exterminate everything, swept over the little Qilin. Unexpectedly, the little Qilin immediately escaped into the void, unable to do anything. The Blood Emperor wanted to free himself from the Underworld Pearl, but he was shocked to discover that his all-creation power was unable to move the Underworld Pearl at all. No matter how it struggled, the Underworld Pearl did not budge at all. He simply couldn't step out of the crack. He was forcibly fixed in place. Once the spatial rift completely collapsed, his torso within the rift would suffer unprecedented damage. The Blood Emperor looked fiercely in Su Yu's direction, but there was no one there. Su Yu and Jiu Yuanzhou had already hidden themselves to prevent the Blood Emperor from launching a counterattack. Unable to kill them, the Blood Emperor flew into a rage and shouted coldly, "Brat, I will remember you. We will meet again." Puff! With two muffled sounds, the suppressed hands and feet inexplicably went limp. The terrifying aura behind the crack instantly dissipated. Then, the light screen cracked, dimmed, and disappeared. In the end, only the ordinary stone wall was left, standing quietly. If it wasn't for the fact that the depths of the Dragon Abyss had turned into a world of lava, no one would believe that an all-creation monster had almost entered this place. The passage between the two worlds was completely severed. The people of the 9 states could no longer enter. The people of the True Dragon had also lost their chance to go to the world of the 9 prefectures. The Jinlong continent was completely sealed off, forming a world of its own. After a long while, Su Yu and Elder Jiu looked at each other and laughed. "Ha! I never dreamed that the Blood Emperor, such an influential figure in the land of the 9 prefectures, would be defeated by a young man like you." Elder Jiu laughed for a long time. Tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes. He seemed to be very pleased. Su Yu revolved his vital energy with great difficulty to stop the bleeding in his abdomen. He then smiled bitterly and said, "If I could, I would rather not have come here." The losses he had suffered in this trip to the Dragon Abyss of the 9 underworlds were unimaginable. His 2 puppets, the Purple Sun Incredible Umbrella, almost all of his divine artifacts and talismans, and the Dry Cloud 5 elemental formations 4 formation pearls were all damaged. Most importantly, his Dantian had been severely damaged, and a vital energy crystal had turned into powder. It was still unknown what these injuries signified. Unexpectedly, Elder Jiu rolled his eyes and said, "The Blood Emperor left behind an arm and a leg, yet you are still not satisfied? The blood essence of an all-creation old monster is so powerful that you can't even begin to imagine it." Su Yu's spirit was shaken, and his gaze locked onto the arm and foot that were suppressed by the underworld pearl. It was obvious that the arm and foot had been severed, but it still emitted a terrifying aura. Extracting the blood essence from it and feeding it to the living creatures of heaven and earth will help them evolve. Elder Jiu's eyes lit up as he spoke. Just like the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, it was almost impossible for it to survive. It could only rely on the blood essence of all creation's old monsters to water it day and night. Was he referring to little Qilin? Elder Jiu was a guard of light, so he should have recognized the little Kylan's true spirit. Su Yu's expression was calm as he said, "Elder Jiu, please part with this pair of arms and legs. I really need them." "What are you talking about? You saved me, and you also saved the people of the Jinlong continent. The Blood Emperor was also forced to retreat by you, so the spoils of war naturally belong to you." Elder Jiu laughed heartily. He didn't seem to have any intention of snatching the spoils of war. If Elder Jiu really coveted this pair of hands and feet, why would he inform Su Yu? So what if he took a step back and killed Su Yu and snatched his treasures? "Elder Jiu, many thanks for helping me." Su Yu cupped his fists and thanked him. The two of them rested on the spot for a while, barely regaining their ability to move. Su Yu retrieved the underworld pearl and sealed the pair of arms that were emitting a shocking aura. Su Yu also found the demon's hair and the formation flag. Although he had suffered a great loss, he had also gained a great deal. "Let's go. Su Yu, your name will spread far and wide. None of the heroes of the future will be able to compete with you. In fact, you're almost on par with the Jiuzhou Emperor in the past. Even the King of Darkness won't be able to overshadow your brilliance." Elder Jiu smiled in relief. Su Yu smiled. The Jiuzhou Emperor in the past sacrificed a lot of his blood essence to reclaim the continent. How can I compare to him? Now that the continent is sealed, the path of martial arts has come to an end. Fame and fortune aren't important anymore. Su Yu smiled. "It's time for me to retire." Time passed quickly, and half a year had passed. The otherworldly remnants had been completely wiped out. The Jinlong continent had been completely reclaimed. The Heavenly Law Alliance, with the help of countless cloud, galloping horses, created more than 100 fairy realm warriors. They conquered all 4 continents and replaced the Empire of Darkness to control the whole continent. The continent's factions were divided by the Heavenly Law Alliance, and no one was allowed to fight against them. Anyone who disobeyed them would be annihilated by more than 100 Fairy Realm warriors. For a time, the continent welcomed an unprecedented peace. The various martial arts techniques were spared from the scourge of war, and the factions' orthodoxies were passed on. After experiencing the chaos of the otherworldly war, the martial artists were vigilant in times of peace, and they worked hard to become stronger. The big and small factions paid more attention to the cultivation of talents, and they did not restrict themselves to recruiting qualified disciples. After 10,000 years, the continent's martial arts techniques began to flourish again. As for the Heavenly Law Alliance, it became the holy land of martial arts techniques in the world. Although it did not recruit external disciples, it was still regarded as the holy land of the continent. More than 100 Fairy Realm warriors tore through time and space, and no one dared to disobey them. As for the Heavenly Law Alliance's master, who was an unparalleled legend, he became an existence that everyone worshipped and worshipped. From Shunyue Island, he had risen like a comet, flying across the Jinlong continent's time and space. As Suyu, he had killed more than half of the Lucian faction's elders. At the Phoenix Cabinet's Great Meet, he had fought against Shun Kong as Inu, as well as the 3 great factions. As for the North Continent's alliance, he had overturned the alliance as the Black Snow Devil King. After 3 years, he had returned as Suyu, annihilating the otherworldly fairy realm, restoring the continent, and repelling all creations. Each and every one of them was a story that shook the world. Many people said that Suyu's life was a legend. He had inspired countless youths of the continent to use him as a role model and train diligently. In fact, countless martial artists even rushed to the places where Suyu had fought and lived to comprehend the traces of his past training. The Shunyue Island, the Lucian faction, the Shintian Manor, and the Inu area were all regarded as holy lands for training. Strong martial artists from all over the world gathered there to exchange pointers. Of course, the Heavenly Law Alliance's headquarters, the Dragon Abyss of the 9 Underworlds, became a holy land that attracted countless martial artists from all over the world. The Dragon Abyss of the 9 Underworlds, which had already collapsed, was occupied by the Heavenly Law Alliance and transformed into an island city. However, no one could deny that it was the true center of the Jinlong continent, the holy land of martial arts techniques. This was because this was the place where Suyu, the continent's king, resided. Seeing his true appearance was something that everyone on the continent, regardless of whether they were men or women. It was a pity that this king had returned from the Dragon Abyss of the 9 Underworlds. He had hidden himself in the forest and never appeared in the world again. Even so, there were still countless martial artists on the Dragon Abyss of the 9 Underworlds island, waiting for the king of the continent to show himself. In the Heavenly Law Alliance's palace on the Dragon Abyss Island, hundreds of fairies, thousands of half-fairies, and tens of thousands of half-gods guarded the depths of the palace. In a quiet, simple, and tranquil courtyard, inside the stone door, which was filled with dense spiritual energy, a young man was sitting cross-legged. A ball of spiritual energy gathered on top of his head and slowly flowed into his skull. However, it flowed out of his abdomen. He opened his eyes and sighed softly. So this is the case? The vital energy crystal in my dantian has shattered, and I can no longer absorb spiritual energy to recast my vital energy crystal. My martial path has come to an end. Regret, bitterness, and loneliness appeared on his face. When he had been struck by the Blood Emperor's gaze, one of his vital energy crystals had shattered. After half a year, he had flipped through many ancient books on the Jinlong continent and tried all sorts of methods, but he was still unable to repair it. If nothing unexpected happened, he would be stuck at the 2 crystals half-fairy realm for the rest of his life. How regretful would it be for him to stop before the fairy realm? To Suyu, who had a firm heart for martial arts, it was a life regret. As he sighed, Suyu took out the Thunder Herb armor. It was filled with nearly 1,000 disastrous thunders. These were the disastrous thunders that he had collected from the Thunder Herb to help the people of the Alliance overcome their tribulations. However, there was no disastrous thunder that belonged to him among them. This scene made him feel even more melancholy. After thinking for a moment, he touched the 9-jade spiritual pearl with his fingertip. A round ball that was 5 feet wide and covered in blue and yellow patterns appeared in his palm. It was as light as a feather. I refined the underworld pearl 4 months ago. I can already control it skillfully. It's a pity that I can no longer use it. Suyu's expression became even more desolate. After pausing for a moment, Suyu took out a dazzling seal surrounded by 5 colored thunderbolts. The 5 elemental strong thunder seal had been forcibly captured by Dark Suyu and refined into the 5 elemental strong thunder seal. Chapter 703. The path of martial arts has been severed from now on, and there is no one in the world who can fight me. What is the point of having it? Suyu slowly closed his eyes, and a sense of loneliness assaulted his heart. After putting away the Thunder Herb armor and the Underworld Pearl, Suyu revolved his cultivation technique. He had already comprehended the Buddhist saint's 8 characters to the final level, the first level of great perfection, the swordsman character. He had completely comprehended the forward formula of Lin Bing Do Zhe. The Heaven Sun gazing at air had already reached the minor mastery level, allowing him to control 2 experts of a higher realm at the same time. So you could already skillfully use the Heaven Extinguishing Divine Palm's Great Moon Palm. Although he wasn't as good as Elder Geo, he had already mastered it. After cultivating for some time, Suyu's mind entered the 9-jade spiritual pearl. Young master, how is your dantian? Is the ancient book that you wear provided effective? Wu Aoyue welcomed him. Even though she was already a level 2 fairy, she was still as cold and detached as before. But when she faced Suyu, she was quite gentle. Suyu forced himself to focus and shook his head. Has it not been repaired? Wu Aoyue's complexion turned gloomy, and her mood became gloomy. I wasn't interested in the art of medicine at that time, so I didn't read too many ancient books in this field. If I could return to the faction, forget it. The Jinlong continent is sealed off, and the path of martial arts has been severed. What's the point of having a cultivation level? Tell me about the Chaos Rainbow Butterfly. Has it swallowed all of the Blood Emperor's blood essence? The Blood Emperor's blood was originally prepared for the little Kylan. However, it wasn't interested in such things. Unexpectedly, the Chaos Multicolored Butterfly yearned for it very much. It was extremely surprised. After devouring it, its growth was astonishing, and its effects were even stronger than when it devoured the Heavenly Orchid Silver Bamboo. Young master, it's already 3 inches long, and it's been abnormally active recently. According to the ancient records, it's about to start spitting silk, and we can harvest the first batch of silk. Wu Aoyue finally regained her spirits. After all, with Suyu's knowledge and magical treasures, who in the Jinlong world could contend against him? Apart from mysterious King of Darkness, no one would be a match for him. Moreover, after gathering the chaotic multicolored butterfly silk, he would be able to weave it into a heaven-defying armor that even all creations would find hard to break. It would be like adding wings to a tiger, and even the King of Darkness would have to bow down to him. One resided deep in the continent, while the other resided in the sea. Between the 2 monarchs, it was up to them to decide who was superior and who was inferior. Thank you for your hard work. So you did not look forward to it much. He was excited. After giving a simple order, he strode to the nursery of the highest rare earths. Within half a year, the 2 heavenly orchid silver bamboos had grown to a height of 20 feet. Sir, according to the ancient books, Tu Zhang is half mature, and it is at least 500 years old. In another half a year, it will mature, and we can then use it to craft a magical artifact. Wu Aoyue carefully observed Suyu's calm expression and introduced him with a strong mental energy. He needed to refine the heavenly orchid silver bamboo swords, gather 9 of them, and use the 9 Suns Cosmos sword formation. In the past, he had looked forward to it endlessly, but now he had lost interest in it. His gaze swept over calmly and landed on the profound feather spiritual pomegranate. The small sapling that was once as tall as a person had now grown into a towering tree that required 10 people to wrap their arms around. The snow-like tree was covered with golden fruits, and the number of them could be counted in the thousands. As for the cloud-galloping horses, they had already multiplied to over 100. Moreover, they were still multiplying at an even faster speed. In less than a month, he would be able to create another 100 fairies. However, none of this mattered anymore. If you want to go out, you can do so at any time. There is no need for you to continue staying here. Suyu turned around and looked at Wu Aoyue. He had already promised to let her roam the Jinlong continent. Since she could not return to Jiuzhou, she no longer had any relationship with Jinlong. She remained silent and stayed in the Nine Jade spiritual pearl, quietly taking care of this world. At this moment, when she heard his words, she remained silent. Only her lips moved, as if she wanted to say something. Fine, as you wish. Whenever you want to leave, you can send a message to me. Suyu patted her shoulder, and his soul left. After returning to his body, Suyu was extremely bored. Suddenly, he heard a melodious voice coming from outside the door. Alliance Master Su, it has been half a year. Ulchin wishes to see you. Outside the door, a beautiful figure could be seen. It was Zi Yunxiang, whom he had not seen for a long time. She had already broken through to the fairy realm and was willing to accompany the Annihilation team to guard outside the stone door and protect Suyu. Everyone in the Alliance knew about this. Creak! The stone door opened, and dust rose into the air. Suyu, who was wearing a white robe, stepped out. This was the first time he had come out of seclusion after half a year. The bright sunlight shone into his eyes. It was slightly dazzling, and Suyu subconsciously shielded his eyes. When he put down his palm, he saw many familiar figures standing quietly in front of him. The Annihilation team, led by Luo Xiong. At the back of the team was a beautiful figure with her head lowered, not daring to look at him. Welcome out of seclusion, Alliance Master. Luo Xiong's eyes were filled with excitement. He and the Annihilation team knelt down on one knee and shouted respectfully from the bottom of their hearts. Their loud and clear voices traveled in all directions. The 100 fairies outside the courtyard heard the voice and were pleasantly surprised. Regardless of whether they were training, sparring, or handling official business, they all flew out of the house and gathered outside the courtyard. They all knelt down and said, "Welcome out of seclusion, Alliance Master." The thousands of half-fairies in the palace all looked shocked. Their expressions were filled with respect and reverence. Clatter. All the half-fairies put down whatever they were doing and said, "Welcome out of seclusion, Alliance Master." The tens of thousands of half-gods outside the palace also knelt down. The tens of thousands of people knelt down, their voices shaking the sky. Inside and outside the island, there was an uproar. The martial artists on the island were overjoyed, and they rushed out of the palace like a tidal wave. The martial artists outside the island rushed back to the island. Some of the people who had just left the island returned at an even faster speed. The hearts of the people were in an uproar. The legendary king of the continent, the legendary Heavenly Law Alliance Master, had come out of seclusion. The tide was like a tidal wave. However, on a reef above the sea, a young man in luxurious clothes stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His demeanor was peerless, and his warm expression carried a hint of coldness. His eyes were piercing, and the space between his brows was emitting a purple light. He looked at the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds and smiled coldly. "I haven't seen you for half a year, and you are already the king of the continent. You're no longer the lucky lad you were in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion all those years ago. Inyu, we will meet again soon." His voice lingered in the air, but there was no one on the reef. The deafening voice penetrated Suyu's ears. Suyu merely smiled. "You may rise." His voice was faint, but it was like thunder from the heavens. It rumbled in the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds and was extremely majestic. When the crowd looked up, it was as if they were looking at the figure of a king. Zi Yunxiang's body shook. When she looked up, she saw that the figure was still that familiar youth. However, he was as majestic as an emperor, and no one dared to approach him. Mind your own business, Suyu said. The people of the Heavenly Law Alliance obeyed. Yunxiang, let old Chen come over. Suyu looked at Zi Yunxiang, his eyes filled with gentleness as he spoke softly. Zi Yunxiang bit her lip, then left the courtyard and led old Chen inside. Greetings, Alliance Master. Welcome back, Alliance Master. Old Chen knelt down on one knee. He was extremely respectful. Now that he was a grade 2 fairy, his respect for Suyu had increased. Suyu smiled. Old Chen, you don't need to be so courteous. Did you report to me about that? Old Chen nodded. Yes, the wedding has already been prepared, and invitations have been sent to all parts of the continent. In 10 days, the whole world will witness the wedding between Alliance Master and Qin Xiener. Hearing this, Luo Xiong and the others became excited. Suyu's wedding would definitely be a big event that would shake the whole Jinlong continent. Those who were invited all felt extremely honored. Zi Yunxiang's body trembled, and her eyes became misty. The day that was supposed to come had finally come. Suyu smiled. Xiener's promise can finally be fulfilled, and the whole world will witness our unfinished wedding. Suyu smiled and said, I can finally fulfill Xiener's promise and let the whole world witness our unfinished wedding. Chapter 704. Brother Suyu, you finally woke up. Xiener missed you so much. Outside the courtyard, a petite figure quickly ran over. Suyu was pleasantly surprised. She was like a helpless little bird as she threw herself into Suyu's embrace. A fragrant breeze blew past. Suyu felt a familiar aura, a familiar figure, and a familiar temperature. Suyu smiled gently and lowered his head to look at her. He had known her since she was 14 years old, and now she was 18 years old. It seemed like time had not left much of a mark on her. Apart from being slightly more mature, she was still the same as when they had first met in the Twilight Mountains. She had a snow-white oval face and 2 crystal-like big eyes. Her long eyelashes covered her eyes. She had a sharp nose, and her lips were as red as cherries. She was like a porcelain doll that had been molded out of clay. At this moment, her bright eyes were filled with joy that came from the depths of her heart. She was no longer shy when she hugged Suyu in front of everyone. It was as if they were family. Xiener, Suyu stroked her head lovingly. How has father been in the past 6 months? Xiener lay in his embrace and nodded her head. Yes, father is fine. He just misses you a lot. Suyu's smile was filled with warmth. After 7 years, it's time for the old man's wish to be fulfilled. Xien, are you ready? A blush appeared on Xiener's porcelain-like skin. She was as beautiful as the sunset. Yes, Xiener said shyly as she leaned deeper into his embrace. I'm the happiest. I want to be your bride forever. Seeing such a happy scene, the crowd couldn't help but smile. Those who knew the truth couldn't help but praise them. After going through so many hardships, the two of them had finally gotten together. They had traveled through the snow in search of plum blossoms. After pausing for a moment, Suyu raised his brows. Xiener, why haven't you broken through? Even a fairy pill can't help you? Xiener had already broken through to the 3 crystals half-fairy realm before Suyu had gone to the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds. After that, the cloud-galloping horse that Suyu had left behind could help other people break through, but it had no effect on her. It seemed like Xiener's breakthrough had brought her to a strange level. Ordinary medicines couldn't help her break through. After a thorough examination, Zhang Xian was unable to find any clues at all. Thus, he deduced that it was most likely due to her unique constitution. The Death Phoenix constitution was Xiener's constitution. It originated from the 9 Hell Phoenix and was the most mysterious and terrifying constitution in the world. Even Yun Yazi, with his vision, had once wanted to take in such a disciple, but he was unable to do so. The Death Phoenix physique was the main obstacle to her breakthrough. Suyu had the intention to ask Yun Yazi, but it was a pity that after he left the mysterious Heavenly Divine Pavilion, he seemed to have used up a lot of his energy and had fallen into a deep slumber. He had yet to wake up. In the end, before Suyu went into seclusion, he gave his only fairy pill to Xiener. This elixir was obtained from the mysterious Heavenly Divine Pavilion, where Tianjizi's elixirs were passed down. It was personally refined by Tianjizi, and it was said to be a nature-defying divine elixir that had a 100% chance of breaking through to the fairy realm. With Tianjizi's cultivation, it was not an exaggeration to say that this pill had a 100% success rate. Perhaps some special constitutions were also taken into account. Thus, this pill was left for Sienna. However, she still hadn't made a breakthrough. So you couldn't help but furrow his brows. Could it be that even Sienna wouldn't be able to make a breakthrough to the fairy realm in her lifetime? No, my intuition tells me that this pill can help me break through. My body seems to desire this pill. Sienna shook her head. Suyu was delighted, but he was startled. You didn't swallow it? Why? Don't you want to break through to the fairy realm? Sienna raised her head and looked at Suyu's face, which had become much thinner. She extended her small hand and stroked his cheek. Yes, I want to break through to the fairy realm even in my dreams. But I want you to break through to the fairy realm even more because your eyes are filled with loneliness. Is it because of me? Suyu unknowingly hugged her even tighter. Sienna's small heart was always filled with him, and she was always thinking about him. When Suyu came back to his senses, he suddenly realized, when did Sienna become so sharp? She can already see through my heart? Suyu lowered his head and looked at her gem-like eyes. It was only then that he realized that the playful young princess had already grown up. Thank you, Sienna. Suyu smiled. A warm feeling filled his heart and expelled his loneliness. He couldn't chase after the Marshall Path's peak, yet he still had a beautiful wife to accompany him for the rest of his life. Sienna, you should consume it. My power has already reached the peak of this world, so it doesn't matter whether I consume it or not. Suyu revealed a faint smile. Sienna shook her head stubbornly. No, I want to leave it for you. Once your injuries are healed, you can consume it. Suyu wanted to dissuade her, but when he saw how resolute she was, he could only give up. In any case, the Jinlong world had regained its peace, and with his protection, no one could harm Sienna. He still had a long way to go, and he would find a way to make her consume it. Then, how are Jingyu and the Phoenix Cabinet's master? Have they woken up? Suyu asked. Sienna raised her head, delight appearing on her face. Sister Jingyu has already woken up. What? She has finally woken up? Suyu felt as if a great burden had been lifted from his heart. She had been asleep for such a long time, so she should have woken up a long time ago. Yet, she still hadn't woken up. Suyu was worried that something unexpected had happened. However, the master of the Phoenix Cabinet is still in a deep sleep. I don't know why, but there were a few times when she was about to wake up, but she went back to sleep. Sienna's face darkened. After all, the master of the Phoenix Cabinet was her teacher. How could she not be concerned? Suyu was deeply concerned, and his voice turned solemn. Let's go and take a look. All of you, carry out your duties. Suyu instructed them briefly, then rushed to the heart-nurturing palace, which was a forbidden area in the palace, with Sienna. This place was guarded by 10 fairies day and night, and even a mosquito would find it difficult to intrude. In the Hall of Mental Cultivation, there were the best doctors in the continent taking care of them at all times. Stepping into the hall, a skinny, pale-faced figure came into view. The master of the Phoenix Cabinet frowned and fell into a deep sleep. Suyu tapped her wrist with his finger and transferred a shred of spiritual energy into her body. At once, Suyu raised his eyebrows and revealed a shocked expression. This power, it's very familiar, isn't it? It's the power of all creation. Suddenly, Elder Jio's solemn voice came from behind. He had nowhere to go, so he stayed in the Heavenly Law Union. He had personally checked on the Phoenix Cabinet's master's injuries. Suyu's expression changed. What's going on? Why is there an additional power of all creation? It shouldn't have suddenly appeared. It's likely that it was hidden in her body all along, but we didn't notice it until recently. Elder Jio furrowed his brows, as he was also confused. A Jinlong didn't have an all creation, so it couldn't have entered her body later on. Was she injured by an all creation? Suyu's gaze became solemn as he sank into deep thought. All of a sudden, he and Elder Jiu looked at each other, and shock appeared in their eyes at the same time. Could it be the so-called Great Saint Master? The two of them asked in a deep voice. Through the battle at the Dragon Abyss of the 9 Underworlds, they had learned from the third Saint Master that the great Saint Master had already been in the Jinlong continent for a long time. However, she had hidden herself well and had never shown herself. She was also a hidden danger that Su Yu was extremely wary of. However, when he thought about it carefully, he felt that it wasn't really possible. If the great Saint Master had such a cultivation, why would she hide herself? Why would she waste the Blood Emperor's fairy artifact to cross the world? Chapter 705. The 2015 elimination of pornography and illegal publications campaign is being carried out, and the Yuewin Group will cooperate with the relevant departments to submit the information. Sienna, clench your fists. If I had studied medicine diligently in the past, my teacher wouldn't have ended up like this. Sienna, who had once concentrated on the martial path, had rejected the Phoenix Master Chio's medical inheritance. With the continent's best medical skill, if Sienna had studied it diligently, she might have been able to understand the Phoenix Master Chio's injuries. Everything will get better, so you don't need to worry about it. Su Yu patted her shoulder and comforted her in a soft voice. Sienna nodded and replied in a soft voice. At this moment, light footsteps could be heard coming from outside the hall. As a faint fragrance wafted in the air, a beautiful figure appeared before everyone's eyes. She had picturesque features, a jade-like nose, and rosy lips. Her facial features were so exquisite that they seemed like jade carvings. At first glance, she seemed like a celestial fairy, yet she also seemed like a celestial fairy in a painting. Such a beauty could only be found in the heavens, yet it was rare to find one in the human world. She was so beautiful that all flowers paled in comparison to her. Even the sun and the moon paled in comparison to her. Even Elder Gio, who was a peerless expert in the past, couldn't help but shudder at this moment, and his pupils contracted slightly. Jingyu. Su Yu was delighted, but he still felt ashamed of his inferiority in front of such a beauty. She was still as beautiful as before, and it was difficult for anyone to look at her directly. However, when Su Yu looked into her eyes, he found them unfamiliar. Okay. Xia Jingyu nodded and wore an indifferent expression. Although she didn't seem cold, she didn't seem happy to see Su Yu again. Su Yu felt like there was an invisible barrier between them. Xia Jingyu held a bowl of medicinal soup and placed it in front of the table. She didn't look at anyone. The medicine is already prepared. Since you're all here, I will let you feed it to her. Xia Jingyu's tone was calm and emotionless. After she finished speaking, she turned around and left, leaving behind only a faint fragrance. Everyone was startled by her words. Brother Su Yu, Sister Jingyu seems to have changed. Sienna looked at Xia Jingyu's departing figure in a daze. Su Yu was confused and nervous. Could it be that Xia Jingyu still had some side effects that she hadn't noticed? Sienna, take good care of the Phoenix Master Chio, while I go and check up on Jingyu. Sienna nodded. Okay, Brother Su Yu, you should go quickly. I'm also very worried about Sister Jingyu. Su Yu tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and chased after her. He followed her scent all the way to the courtyard where she was resting. As soon as he entered the palace, Su Yu was stunned. In the courtyard, there were clusters of pear trees. Unfortunately, it was autumn, so only withered branches remained. The dark yellow leaves rustled in the wind. Under the pear blossoms, in front of a stone table, a peerless figure sat quietly, facing a tree and drinking alone. This familiar scene evoked pleasant memories in his mind. Do you still remember? Under the pear blossom tree, the full moon shines. You taught me the holy will. Xia Jingyu didn't turn around. She sipped her wine and said slowly. Su Yu was disappointed and frustrated. He walked into the courtyard and sat on the stone bench opposite her. I remember. Su Yu poured himself a cup of wine, his heart suddenly heavy. Unfortunately, things have changed, and so have people. Xia Jingyu raised her eyes and looked at Su Yu. Her gaze was distant, as if she didn't have the slightest bit of warmth. Su Yu didn't reply. He drank a mouthful of wine. In a mysterious, heavenly divine pavilion, in the wisest Milky Way formation, there were 3 black boxes. I obtained Tianjizi's divine decree in one, and you obtained the real dragon spirit veins in the other. According to our agreement, We will share the third box equally. Now, take it out, Xia Jingyu said indifferently, her tone as if she was talking to a stranger. Suyu nodded. He didn't intend to monopolize this item. He took out a black iron box, which had yet to be opened. Xia Jingyu flicked her finger, and the black iron box opened. A shocking aroma wafted out. As the aroma entered his nose, Suyu felt his spirit increase, and he was full of vitality. Suyu's expression changed from the corner of his eye. He saw that the yellow leaves of the pear blossoms in the depths of autumn actually glowed with new green. Snow-white pear blossoms bloomed continuously. The barren ground in the courtyard also sprouted like bamboo shoots after a rain. Grass grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. For a moment, it was as if time had reversed. It was extremely shocking. Suyu was startled. Suddenly, his expression changed abruptly. Vital energy gushed out from his body and covered his whole body. At the same time, his figure flashed and flew in front of Xia Jingyu. Jingyu, be careful. The vitality is too strong. If you absorb too much, you will explode and die, right? After all, this is the fate-altering elixir, a divine elixir passed down from the ancient world. When faced with it, it is comparable to a poison that pierces the intestines. Xia Jingyu was surprisingly calm. At that moment, the black iron box had yet to be opened, but she already knew what was in the box and accurately explained its origin. Suyu was surprised. The current Xia Jingyu gave him a strange feeling. The iron box opened slowly, revealing two exquisite jade pagodas. Inside the pagodas, there was a 9-colored round pearl enshrined in each of the pagodas. At first glance, they looked like spiritual objects of the universe. It was this object that was emitting a terrifying vitality. Whoosh! Xia Jingyu's palm sucked in the air, and one of the jade pagodas was sucked into her sleeve. She calmly said, "If a dead person consumes this elixir, they will come back to life. If a living person consumes it, they will die on the spot. Rise, die, return, life." Suyu's eyes were filled with shock. Was there really an elixir in the world that could bring the dead back to life? Looking at the heaven-defying vitality in the garden, Suyu's heart was somewhat convinced. "Keep it. You might have a use for it in the future," Xia Jingyu calmly said. Suyu nodded and kept it in the 9-jade spiritual pearl. Looking at the unfamiliar Xia Jingyu, Suyu opened his mouth slightly, as if he wanted to say something. However, Xia Jingyu spoke first. "Suyu, do you love me?" Xia Jingyu suddenly turned her head, and her cold expression melted. Her eyes were filled with expectation. Suyu was silent for a moment, then nodded. Yes. A smile blossomed on her beautiful face, and it was filled with joy. Xia Jingyu seemed to have been released, and she threw herself into Suyu's embrace. Her voice was filled with surprise, and it was trembling with joy. "I knew that, Brother Suyu only has me in your heart. Since that is the case, Brother Suyu, marry me. I am the one you love, not Qin Xianer. I, Xia Jingyu, am your bride in this world." Feeling Xia Jingyu's tears of joy, Suyu felt even colder. He extended his arms and slowly pushed Xia Jingyu away from his embrace. Suyu's expression was calm, but firm. "I am sorry, Jingyu, but I cannot marry you." Xia Jingyu's smile stiffened. The mist in her eyes was still swirling, accumulating and accumulating. "Why?" she cried, not because she was happy, but because she was sad, and heartbroken. She clutched her chest and looked straight at Suyu. "Tell me why. I was the one who met you first. I was the one who went through thick and thin with you. I was the one who gave you everything. It was me. Why is it Qin Xianer in the end?" Her voice was filled with hysteria, and it was filled with an outburst that had been suppressed for a long time. For Suyu, she had pointed her sword at the Holy King. For Suyu, she had used her own eyes to see the rise and fall of the real dragon in his place. For Suyu, she was willing to give herself to the Central Prefecture's king in exchange for his life. For Suyu, she was willing to give up her life and bear all kinds of grievances. Her heart was always filled with Suyu's shadow, and there was no room for anyone else. However, in the end, when she woke up, she received the news that Suyu was going to marry Qin Xianer. How cruel and heartless was that? Suyu's heart was in pain. What was supposed to happen had finally happened. When he chose Qin Xian'er, this day had come. Because I owe her a promise, Suyu said. Xia Jingyu shook her head, and her tears finally flowed down her cheeks. Her beautiful, clear eyes were filled with a burning light. What about me? Apart from you, I have nothing else. I only have you. Her heart-wrenching cries reached Suyu's heart and tore it apart. I owe you a lifetime. Suyu closed his eyes and turned around slowly. He was determined not to look at her again. However, when he turned around, tears fell from the corners of his eyes. Looking at Suyu's back as he left, Xia Jingyu wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. Her gentle eyes were filled with madness. You, I hate you. I, Xia Jingyu, swear that I will make you regret it. A chilling cry, filled with hatred, echoed in the courtyard. Suyu's whole body trembled. It was as if his heart had been hollowed out, and he had completely lost something. He would never see the beautiful figure who had pulled out her sword for him, shed tears for him, and risked everything for him. The fate between them had been severed. Jingyu, I am sorry. I owe Xian'er a promise, so I married her. The reason why I did not marry you was because I wanted to compensate you in another way. Suyu left the courtyard. Behind him was a garden full of pear blossoms, which were as white as spring. 10 days later, the whole world was shocked. That day was the focus of the whole world. The Heavenly Law Alliance's master, a legendary figure, was getting married. Many people came to the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds to congratulate him. All of the world's faction leaders were invited to attend. All of a sudden, all of the world's strongest people were gathered there. From the North Continent's 3 great super factions to the Lucian faction, all of them were invited. The number of people gathered at the Dragon Abyss of the 9 underworlds exceeded several 100,000 in just 10 days. Old Chun was excited as he looked down from the Heavenly Law Alliance's palace. All the heroes in the world, as long as they had a name, were invited. I didn't expect that the Heavenly Law Alliance would have such a prosperous day. I'm afraid that even the First World Senior wasn't able to achieve this. But why did the Alliance Master, who has always kept a low profile, invite so many people? Old Chin still had doubts in his heart. At that moment, it was noon. Old Chin's heart trembled. The auspicious hour had arrived. Guests, please enter the banquet. Old Chin activated the vital energy in his body and shouted loudly. At that moment, his voice traveled thousands of miles. Above the sea, thousands of miles of islands were laid out, and thousands of banquets were arranged neatly. At a glance, it was extremely majestic. Such extravagance was unprecedented, but no one dared to comment. That was because he was Su Yu, the continent's greatest king. His wedding is indeed different from the rest. It was unknown whether it was sarcasm or self-mockery. At a table of banquets, a proud figure sat quietly. Her expression was cold, and her beautiful eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Wooer, at this moment, you cannot speak nonsense. Beside him was a dignified, elegant, and beautiful figure. Her eyes were dim, but she forced herself to stay alert. We only need our blessings. Mo Wu bit her red lips and drank a mouthful of wine gloomily. And Euro and Mo Wu, the 2 people who avoided Su Yu, actually appeared at his wedding. The world's greatest person, who was once a fellow disciple, would be proud of this. Ji Hongxue was also at the table, and she laughed lightly. She felt that fate was making fools of them. Yes, all the people here are famous strong people. Even small factions like us were invited. If we were not in the same faction, I'm afraid that we would not have a place here. Chan Yufei blinked her beautiful eyes, and her heart was filled with emotions. She recalled all of her experiences with Su Yu, and her feelings were also complicated. Chapter 706. The 2015 Elimination of Pornography and Illegal Publications campaign is in progress. The Yuewen Group will actively cooperate with the relevant departments to submit information. Authors, please be vigilant when writing. Don't let Chan Yufei look sideways. Sitting at the same table was a woman with a slightly noble aura. She sat prettily, and her snow-white skin was slightly bashful. Princess Yin Yin, Li Hao's fiancée. I didn't expect her to come. Chan Yufei had a strange look. Everyone in the Lucian faction knew about what had happened between the two of them. Li Hao had failed to frame Su Yu and caused Yun Yin to marry Su Yu. They had become a joke in the faction. It is said that Yun Yin avoided Su Yu and stayed at her family. This time, she must have been forced by her family to come. Ji Hongxue smiled playfully. Chan Yufei nodded and looked around. It seems that Su Yu's acquaintances are all here. Even the ordinary people were invited. Your disciple's father is also here. At a glance, it was Ji Hongshue's last disciple, Li Jun. He was only 10 years old and sat quietly beside a middle-aged man in a yellow robe. Father, the legend of the continent is really an old friend of yours. Li Jun stood respectfully behind a middle-aged emperor. His face was full of shock and glory. Deep in the world of cultivation, he understood the meaning of Su Yu better than his father. Su Yu is the peak of the martial path, an almost legendary existence. He knew very well what an honor it was to be invited this time. Brother Su, do you still remember me, the third prince? The yellow-robed man was the third prince. Congratulations, old friend. At a table not far from them, Zidong Lai was a little depressed and sighed. Sometimes it will happen. Housemaster, why are you so stubborn? Xiang'er's destiny is in her own hands. Lin Yunhe smiled and comforted him. Zidong Lai sighed and looked at Zi Yunxiang, who was silent beside him. He felt helpless. Father, I'm fine. Zi Yunxiang smiled slightly, but her smile was very forced. Anyone could see that she had a lot on her mind. The table behind them attracted a lot of attention because it was filled with astonishingly beautiful women. All of them were outstanding beauties. In the mainland, only the Phoenix Cabinet could have such a lineup. Pavilion Master, it doesn't feel good in your heart, right? Fairy Feng had a smile that was not a smile. She lowered her voice. The Phoenix Cabinet's master pretended to be calm. The fate between him and me ends here. There's nothing more to say. As for you, don't you feel the same way? Fairy Feng was startled. Her smile faded and she remained silent. After a long time, she faintly sighed. After 10 minutes, all the guests were seated. Let the bride and groom enter, Elderchin shouted. The crowd was in an uproar, and their eyes shot toward the top of the palace. In an instant, colorful ribbons filled the sky and firecrackers filled the sky. Amidst the riot of colors, two fiery red figures walked out of the palace together. The man was dressed in a loose red robe. His silver hair fluttered in the wind, and he was in high spirits. He looked like an immortal who had descended to the mortal world. The woman wore a phoenix cloak with a jade hairpin and a phoenix crown on her head. Her immortal clothes fluttered in the wind. She was extremely beautiful. A pair of golden boy and jade girl floated in front of the 10,000 seats. With their backs facing the sky, full of colorful ribbons, the two of them descended like immortals. The scene was magnificent to the extreme. So beautiful. Someone in the crowd couldn't help but exclaim. The people were beautiful, the scenery was beautiful, and the atmosphere was even more beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for coming all the way here to attend my wedding. I'm extremely grateful. Su Yu bowed toward the 100,000 people from afar. Congratulations, Alliance Master Su. The crowd was in an uproar, and they all came forward to greet him. From Shanyue Island to the Lucian faction, then to the 100 Territories Alliance, and finally to the entire continent, countless old friends congratulated him. Alliance Master Su, congratulations. In the crowd, the great lord from the Empire of Darkness also stood up to congratulate him. After the battle at the Dragon Abyss of the 9 Underworlds, the great lord had let go of all his previous grudges. He was filled with gratitude and respect from the bottom of his heart. The 100,000 congratulatory voices shook the sky. Su Yu smiled and looked back at Qin Xiener, who was beside him. Xiener, are you satisfied with the 100,000 congratulatory voices and the whole world witnessing it? Xiener's small hand held Su Yu's hand tightly, showing her nervousness. When she heard that, her face turned red and her eyes became misty. Her voice was slightly choked. Yes, it's like a dream. I'm finally going to be Brother Su Yu's bride. I am so happy. Unknowingly, Her voice was choked with sobs. Tears rolled down her cheeks and fell on the back of Suyu's hand. Feeling the warmth of her tears, Suyu unknowingly held her hand tightly. "Sinner, don't worry. Today, I will give you a wedding that you will never forget," Suyu said softly. Old Chun was gratified and excited. "Let the wedding begin. First, bow to your parents." As his voice fell, countless guests looked at each other. Normally, the wedding ceremony was a bow to the heavens and earth. The heavens and earth were the most important, followed by the parents, and finally, the couple bowed to each other. Suyu's wedding ceremony had skipped the bow to the heavens and earth. He didn't bow to the heavens and earth. This action caused the guests to murmur endlessly. As expected of Alliance Master Su, he doesn't bow to the heavens and earth, nor does he respect ghosts and gods. Even if he doesn't bow to the heavens and earth, it's nothing much. But to dare to do so, he is really unique. Only those who knew Suyu's past understood what he meant. He had always defied the heavens and went against fate. Why would he bow to the heavens and earth? No matter how many times he rose, or how he forcefully formed the pure divine decree, he had never bowed to the heavens. Why would he, who despised the heavens and earth, kneel to the heavens and earth? Everyone smiled and looked at Suyu silently. He was holding his wedding ceremony. Suyu's expression was calm. He held Xiener's small hand and bowed to the Duke of Xianyu, who was sitting high up. However, at the moment when he bowed, a clap of thunder resounded in the clear sky. At the same time, a strong wind blew, and the clouds rose. The blue sky was quickly filled with dark clouds. The whole dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds was quickly enveloped by the dark clouds, and the surroundings were pitch black. The sudden appearance of the demonic phenomenon caused the guests' expressions to change abruptly. What happened? The Phoenix Cabinet's master looked at the sky in surprise, extremely puzzled. A similar scene had only appeared half a year ago, when the terrifying aura had descended upon the Jinlong continent. The originally joyous and harmonious atmosphere was suddenly swept away. Countless people were shocked and could not sit still. Elder Gio slowly stood up from his seat. His old face was replaced by a grave expression, and his eyes were filled with fear as he looked above him. There was even a trace of fear in his voice. On the stage, Xiener's body trembled. Her small body trembled under the inexplicable pressure, and she unknowingly leaned towards Suyu. Suyu held Xiener's small hand and looked calmly at the demonic sky, which was filled with dark clouds. "Is it finally here? I haven't seen it for a long time. Heaven's might." Suyu's eyes were filled with calmness, as if he had long expected such a scene to occur. The sky rumbled, and lightning gradually appeared. The deafening thunder shook everyone's eardrums. All of a sudden, the dark clouds above Suyu's head started rotating rapidly, forming a giant rotating cloud. When one looked up, it seemed as if a gap had appeared in the sky. It was extremely shocking. From the vortex, an aura that caused people's hearts to tremble gradually enveloped the area. "Tie the knot. Bow to the heavens and earth." The illusory voice was loud and clear, and it filled the entire area. Although they could clearly hear it, they felt as if it was not a voice, but a voice that reverberated in the depths of their souls. The crowd was shocked. The heavens and earth were speaking. Suyu wanted to go through the wedding ceremony, but he had to bow to the heavens and earth first. Elder Joe's expression was grave, and he looked at the vortex in shock. His pupils contracted, as if he had discovered something. His face trembled with fear. Suyu's gaze was calm. "I don't need the heavens and earth to witness my wedding. I don't need the heavens and earth's approval. You should get lost as far away as you can." After he spoke, he held Xiener's small hand and said gently, "Xiener, let's continue." Feeling the power in Suyu's hand, the frightened Xiener's heart suddenly calmed down. She held Suyu's hand and kowtowed to him. Although the Duke of Xianyu was shocked by the strange phenomenon in the sky, he was extremely calm and accepted it. Kowtow. Elder Chin's body trembled in fear, but he still forced himself to remain calm. Suyu and Xiener kowtowed as they heard him. Rumble. All of a sudden, thunderous roars filled with boundless anger could be heard. Hundreds of thunderbolts streaked across the sky and illuminated the world. Above the sea, huge waves surged continuously, and the sound was extremely shocking. Bang! Hundreds of thunderbolts, which seemed like they could destroy the world, fell at the same time and bombarded Su Yu and Xian'er. Those who defy the heavens should be killed. The illusory voice sounded again, and it was filled with the heaven's might. Each of the hundreds of thunderbolts gave everyone a feeling of destruction. Even a level 1 fairy would be turned into ashes in an instant. Compared to the disastrous thunder, this thunderbolt was even more frightening. Alliance Master! The Annihilation team shouted in shock. They wanted to help, but how could they be in time to fight against the thunderbolts? However, Suyu did not even lift his head. With his back facing the destructive thunderbolts, he casually waved a 5-colored armor from his sleeves. Within the armor, hundreds of thunderbolts roared angrily, and the thunderbolts that were sweeping toward them suddenly expanded. In an instant, the violent sound of mountains collapsing and the earth cracking could be heard. The resulting shockwaves set off boundless, huge waves that swept across the Dragon Abyss Island. The sea roared wildly, and huge waves that were 1,000 feet high were crashing toward the banquet. Formation rise. Seeing that the guests were about to be blown away, suddenly, under the sea of the banquet, an intense light was emitted. A huge, yellowish light screen appeared, forming a semicircle. From top to bottom, it covered the banquet, protecting them. The strong air current rushed over, and the huge light screen trembled violently, but it did not break. The Phoenix Cabinet's protective formation, someone in the crowd said in surprise. No, it's somewhat similar, but its power is even more shocking. I'm afraid that even a level 5 fairy would not be able to blast it open. Elder Jiu was extremely shocked. Who could have taught him how to create such a powerful formation? This person was definitely not someone from Jinlong. The Phoenix Cabinet's master widened her eyes in shock. Fairy Feng said in surprise, half a year ago, before Su Yu went into seclusion, he borrowed the blueprint of the Phoenix Cabinet's protective formation. Could it be that he had predicted that today's crisis would occur? Looking at the composed Su Yu on the stage, the crowd suddenly felt that Su Yu did not bow to the heavens on purpose. It was because he had already predicted this. Second bow. Elder Chun continued. Su Yu and Qin Xian'er kowtowed for the second time. At that moment, hundreds of thunderbolts rolled down from the sky again. However, they were easily neutralized by the thousands of disastrous thunderbolts accumulated in the Thunder Herb armor. Third bow. Finally, Su Yu and Qin Xian'er kowtowed 3 times, completing their bow to the Duke of Xinyu. Husband and wife, bow to each other. The last bow was a bow between husband and wife. With this bow, they were officially husband and wife. Su Yu pulled Xian'er up. Amidst the thunderbolts, he looked into Xian'er's eyes. Xian'er. Qin Xian'er's face was filled with shyness, excitement, and joy. Chapter 707. The 2015 Elimination of Pornography and Illegal Publications campaign is currently in progress, and the Yuewin Group will cooperate with the relevant departments to submit the information. Authors, please be careful when writing. Those who go against the will of the heavens will be punished by the heavens. The heavens once again emitted a shocking and indifferent voice. At this moment, the lightning disappeared. However, an aura that made people tremble suddenly erupted from the vortex. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, an ancient tower slowly descended from the vortex. The ancient tower was filled with a terrifying pressure, and all living beings felt as if they were being suppressed by it, causing them to feel restless. At the top of the ancient tower, a blurry figure of a youth was sitting cross-legged. Beside him was a mysterious and unfathomable ancient sword. The ancient sword contained a peerless, murderous aura, as if it wanted to exterminate all living beings. Just looking at it would cause one's heart to beat wildly, as if it was about to shatter. Such a scene caused the pupils of the Phoenix Cabinet's master to shrink. During the Phoenix meet, when Su Yu had gone against the will of the heavens to form the pure divine decree, this ancient tower had descended to obstruct him. Now, it had descended once again. It symbolized the heavens, the earth, and the will of the heavens that ruled all living beings. If the heavens wanted someone to die, that person had to die. The will of the heavens ruled over everything. Destroy. A green light pillar suddenly shot out from the giant tower. The light pillar was filled with an aura that could exterminate all living beings. The light pillar enveloped not only Su Yu, but also the entire dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds. Upon seeing this, Elder Jio's expression changed. Everyone, leave the island. It's dangerous. Elder Jio felt a great threat from the light pillar. However, the light pillar was extremely fast, so how could the people on the island retreat? Enter the palace. Suddenly, Su Yu waved his right arm, and a green light flickered in his hand as a beautiful figure appeared. It was Wu Aoyue, who had a cold expression on her face. Wu Aoyue had a calm expression as she commanded 10,000 people to enter the Heavenly Law Alliance Palace. At the same time, she quickly crushed a jade pendant. Along with a cracking sound, another giant light screen enveloped the entire Heavenly Law Alliance Palace. At this moment, the light pillar shot down with a rumble. The terrifying light pillar contained the will of the heavens, which could exterminate all living beings. Everything that was enveloped by the light pillar melted like snowflakes. The birds that did not have enough time to fly away turned into nothingness like smoke. The giant stones melted like snowflakes. This was an erasure of existence. When the beam of light swept past, a scene that made everyone at the banquet gasp appeared. The dragon abyss of 9 underworlds, which had existed for 10,000 years, was completely wiped out. Nothing was left. Such a terrifying, destructive aura. Even a divine master wouldn't be able to come out unscathed. Shock appeared in Elder Jio's eyes, and his expression became grave. If he were to enter the light of world annihilation, he would definitely not be able to survive with his current cultivation. However, what made his pupils constrict was that a light screen was floating on the island where the dragon abyss of 9 underworlds had disappeared. The Heavenly Law Alliance's palace, which was still intact, was displayed on the screen. The person inside was not injured at all. In fact, Su Yu and Qin Xian still maintained their bowing posture. It was as if the destructive beam of light had no effect on him at all. Su Yu and Qin Xian raised their heads and bowed. The ceremony is complete. Elder Qin shouted. With this shout, Su Yu and Qin Xian officially became husband and wife. After 8 years, they had finally consummated their marriage. Amidst the sky full of lightning, the wrath of the heavens, and the world-destroying divine light, they defied the heavens to get married. Brother Su Yu. Xian'er's eyes were filled with excitement as she leaned into Su Yu's embrace. Her delicate body trembled slightly as she said, "I'm not dreaming." Su Yu smiled gently as he hugged her. He then looked at the crowd with a smile. "Thank you all for witnessing my wedding with Xian'er," Su Yu said in a loud voice. "Now, I ask all of you to retreat for the time being. I will face all of this alone." Rumble. All of a sudden, the sea below the palace, where the dragon abyss of 9 underworlds used to be, was split in two, revealing a deep and serene cave at the bottom of the sea. Elder Jio was startled by this, and he exclaimed in surprise, "The dragon abyss of 9 underworlds?" The dragon abyss of 9 underworlds was inside of it. The magma that filled it had already cooled down half a year ago. At the same time, when it was opened, a shocking amount of spiritual energy rushed out of it. It was 10 times denser than the outside world, and it was comparable to the Empire of Darkness's land, which had been accumulating for 10,000 years. If one observed it carefully, they would discover that it was filled with countless spiritual treasures and rich resources. It was enough for 100,000 people here to live for several hundred years. Elder Jio was even more shocked by such a sight. All of this had been prepared by Su Yu in advance. The crowd was in an uproar, and they all entered the dragon abyss of 9 underworlds to avoid the terrifying heavenly wrath in the sky. After a short while, 100,000 people left. However, there were still a few people who did not leave. Alliance Master, the Annihilation Team, is with you. Luo Xiong led the Annihilation Team and followed closely behind Su Yu. Elder Joe also stood beside Suyu and did not leave. There were also the Great Lord, the Phoenix Cabinet's master, and Ji Hongxue. All of them stood beside Suyu and looked up at the tall tower, which was emitting the heavenly wrath. Suyu looked around. He saw fear on their faces, but he also saw determination. Suyu felt relieved and smiled calmly. I'm very happy that all of you are willing to do this. However, this is a battle that belongs to me, so all of you should enter the Dragon Abyss immediately. I will seal the Dragon Abyss of 9 underworlds in a while, and the outside world will not be able to break in. This way, even if the continent is destroyed, all of you will still be able to survive. Elder Gio could not hide his confusion. Lad, what are you planning? Suyu replied, I had an ominous premonition before the battle in the Dragon Abyss of 9 underworlds. I assumed that the Blood Emperor would disappear after he retreated. However, in the past 6 months, it has been increasing day by day. This is why I knew that everything was not over yet, and that the true disaster had yet to befall us. Hence, I have been secretly preparing for it for half a year. He then added, all of the resources stored in the Dragon Abyss of 9 underworlds are enough for all of the world's experts, people with outstanding aptitudes, and people who are most precious to me, to use for several hundred years. Today, I took advantage of my wedding to gather all of you here. I hoped that all of you would witness my wedding with Sienna, and I also wanted to protect all of you. He then added, I can't protect the whole continent, but I can only protect all of you. All of the people were shocked. He had started planning for it half a year ago. Moreover, just as he had expected, the worlds had appeared. Then, what is the matter with these formations? Elder Gio was surprised. These powerful formations were quite extraordinary. I have to thank the third Saint Master. I got a secret book on formations from him, and it was you who helped me set them up. Suyu pointed at Wu Aoyue, who was standing behind him quietly. Wu Aoyue was very experienced, and she knew a little about formations. In the past 6 months, she had tried her best to comprehend several of them. Moreover, Suyu had plentiful materials, so he had managed to set up 2 great formations in half a year. Upon hearing this, Elder Gio was left speechless. There's no time to lose. All of you should go inside. I will face them alone, Suyu urged. As he looked at the tower, his gaze became ice cold. The enemy is too strong, and none of you can help me. Instead, you will become a burden to me. So, all of you should leave. Don't waste my efforts. Suyu had been preparing for half a year just to protect them. All of them were hesitant, but in the end, under Suyu's urging, they all entered the tower. Even Elder Gio entered the tower. In the end, only one person held Suyu's hand and refused to leave. Sienna, I don't want you to suffer any harm. So, you should also go, Suyu said. Sienna shook her head, while no fear appeared on her face. Instead, a bright smile appeared on her face as she held Suyu's hand even tighter. I will hold your hand and grow old with you. If you die, I won't live on alone. Suyu revealed a gratified smile. Okay. As he spoke, he hugged her. Sienna felt gratified, and she clenched her fists, while determination appeared in her eyes. However, all of a sudden, she felt a pain in her neck, while her head became dizzy. Before she fainted, she understood what Suyu meant. Brother Suyu, I'm sorry, Sienna, but I will face them alone. Suyu carried the unconscious Sienna to the Dragon Abyss and handed her over to Wu Aoyue. Protect her. Wu Aoyue nodded and looked deeply at Suyu. You should also be careful. Suyu nodded and flew into the sky. As he clenched his fist, numerous golden leaves flew out of his sleeves and covered the entrance of the Dragon Abyss. Elder Gio was slightly confused at first, but his face turned pale with fright. The leaves of the Heavenly Orchid Silver Bamboo. The Heavenly Orchid Silver Bamboo was Jojo's #1 divine bamboo, and he knew about it well. However, it was precisely because he knew about its preciousness that he was shocked by it. Suyu unexpectedly possessed such a divine object, which all creation old monsters yearned for, but couldn't get. Judging from the large number of leaves, Suyu must have possessed a large amount of divine bamboo. This lad really hid his strength well. Elder Gio was shocked beyond words, as Suyu was always able to surprise him again and again. The world's #1 divine bamboo is such a hard object, and even if a divine master came here personally, he wouldn't be able to break the seal. This was the key object that would protect them for eternity. Unless someone opened it from the inside, no external force would be able to break it. After Su Yu had done all of this, he didn't have to worry about anything else. As long as the people inside didn't act foolishly and open the seal themselves, the outside world wouldn't be able to do anything to them. At this moment, Su Yu raised his head and looked at the tower with a cold glint in his eyes. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. Isn't it time to settle our debt once and for all, great Saint Master?" Su Yu's words were shocking. Although the dragon abyss was sealed, it was still possible to see what was happening outside. When the people in the dragon abyss heard this, they all fell silent. The great Saint Master? The most mysterious commander of the Black Shadow Guards in the otherworldly army? He is actually this sword-wielding youth who represents the will of heaven? Elder Gio's eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? This tower has always existed. So how could it be the great Saint Master? He had appeared at the Phoenix Meet in the past. If he was the great Saint Master, didn't that mean that he had been in the Jinlong continent before the otherworldly army invaded? If that was the case, why hadn't he appeared yet? What was even more unbelievable was that the great Saint Master was the representative of heaven's might, who was in charge of all lives. This was absolutely impossible. You dare to defy the will of heaven and earth. You should be killed. The youth looked at Elder Gio. Although his lips didn't open, he still spoke sharply. The heavenly might contained within his words rumbled loudly. Su Yu stood at the peak of the palace and looked at the sky. Represent the will of heaven and earth. These words can deceive thousands of people, but they can't deceive my eyes. Back then, when I formed the pure divine decree, I used the will of defying to obtain the true will. Although my eyes were injured after a short while, it was enough for me to see your true face. Su Yu's eyes were filled with disdain. The will of heaven you speak of is not the will of heaven and earth, but the return. True, God, will. You are the same as me, a martial artist who can form the pure divine decree that emits the will of heaven. You are just an ordinary person. Su Yu revealed the truth. Su Yu's heavenly eyes represented the punishment of heaven and sent down the will of heaven. The sword-wielding youth, who was the so-called representative of heaven and earth, was the same. Like Su Yu, he was an ordinary person, not a god. Don't you dare. The sword-wielding youth spoke sharply again. However, before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Su Yu's thunderous voice. Stop pretending. You are just a character that the Central Prefecture's king placed in the Jinlong continent to prevent the Jinlong continent from producing strong martial artists. Hence, when the Jinlong continent breaks through to the fairy realm, the tribulation that they have to go through is usually very frightening. In fact, it is many times more frightening than the tribulation of the fairy realm in Jiuzhou. Anyone who goes through the tribulation has no chance of surviving. When Elder Gio and the people of the Heavenly Law Alliance went through their tribulations, after the 3 normal tribulations, an extremely frightening golden tribulations would appear and kill them. Hence, it could be seen that the last tribulations was done on purpose. This person was a youth who was pretending to be the will of heaven. The will of heaven is not to be trifled with. The youth said indifferently. The light of destruction gathered in the tower once again. Chapter 708. The 2015 campaign to eliminate pornography and illegal publications is in progress. Llewellyn Group will actively cooperate with the relevant departments and submit information. Authors, please be vigilant when writing. Do not violate the rules. He raised his hand and tapped on the Thunderherb armor floating above his head. The lightning that had been accumulating for a long time completely exploded. There were more than 800 thunderbolts, colorful and dazzling. Among them were tribulation thunders and hundreds of strange golden tribulation thunders. Ordinary tribulation thunder would appear when one was going through the tribulation to become a celestial. However, the golden tribulation thunder that appeared at the end was the thunder that deliberately erased their existence. Have a taste of your own thunder." As Suyu shouted coldly, 800 thunderbolts roared like thunder dragons, roaring through the clouds. From the ground, they engulfed the vortex in the sky with a rumble. Such a shocking scene was like the end of the world, shaking everyone's hearts. At this moment, the sea, the continent, the north, south, east, and west were all affected by the dense thunder. Even the farthest eastern continent could sense the thunder coming from the sea abyss. For a time, the entire continent fell into an inexplicable panic. At the top of the ancient tower, the young man's indifferent expression changed for the first time as he frowned slightly. Such a strange thunder herb armor seemed to be somewhat unexpected. After all, the thunder herb was only used to resist thunderbolts. However, the thunder herb in Suyu's palm could directly absorb the disastrous thunderbolts and turn them into its own. The most important thing was that Suyu had mastered quite a few thunder herbs. At this moment, the ancient pagoda rumbled. World-destroying light descended, dazzling the world. The hundreds of lightning bolts and the light of the ancient pagoda, both containing the power to destroy the heavens and the earth, collided at this moment. Bang! It was as if the primal chaos had just been born, and the heavens and earth had been split into two, erupting with a deafening sound that shook the heavens and earth. The sound waves contained in the sound were filled with destructive power, and they spread out in all directions. With the dragon abyss of 9 underworlds as the center, the water of the sea flowed in all directions. Boundless tsunamis swept across the continent, drowning the ancient lands. In the northern continent, countless mountains were submerged by the roaring sea. The Lucian faction, the Wulong Snowfield, the 100 Territories Alliance, and the Phoenix Cabinet were all swallowed up by the sea and sank to the bottom of the sea. The powerful tsunami pushed the entire continent several thousand kilometers away. The northern continent had been completely wiped out. Countless living beings in the northern continent were wiped out on the spot. As for the rest of the continent, mountains collapsed, volcanoes erupted, and cities were reduced to ruins in the prehistoric earthquake. The calamity that descended in an instant caused the people of the continent to fall into fear. Shouts, cries of panic, and screams filled the world. Under the dragon abyss, they, who had witnessed this unprecedented collision, were already unable to use any words to express the shock in their hearts. How was this a battle? This was clearly the destruction of the world. When the shock wave slowly dissipated, the situation on the field became clear. Suyu stood at his original spot, completely unharmed. In the sky, the dense dark clouds that had gathered had long been reduced to dust by the world-ending collision. All that was left was the lonely ancient pagoda floating in the void, and the young man on top of the ancient pagoda. Within the terrifying lightning, the ancient pagoda actually still remained. However, it was in extremely bad condition, signs of collapse everywhere. Pieces of broken bricks peeled off and fell into the sea. It was clear who had the upper hand in the collision just now. The tribulation lightning that gathered 100 people was even more terrifying. Even an almighty divine master might not dare to easily block it. So it was not strange for the ancient pagoda to end up like this. The slightly strange thing was that although the ancient pagoda was extremely damaged, the destructive aura emitted from it did not weaken at all. It was extremely strange. Although the young man on top of the ancient pagoda was in good condition, his eyes were burning with anger. He no longer had the indifference of looking down on the common people. Suyu, the young man's murderous intent was obvious. Suyu's lips curled into a mocking smile. Why? Are you no longer pretending to be the heavens? A mere mortal like you wants to rule the world like the will of the heavens? Ridiculous. What a joke. The young man was furious, and he could no longer pretend. Back then, I should have killed you at all costs. The young man looked at him coldly. Logically speaking, since he was in the Jinlong, he clearly had countless opportunities to attack. However, he never showed himself. He only showed himself when people were undergoing tribulations, or when he went against the heavens. It could be seen that he was afraid of something, or that there was some kind of restriction on him that could not be easily broken. Otherwise, so you would not have survived until now. You could try now. Suyu put away the dull, thunder herb armor and stood with his hands behind his back. If you have any abilities, just show me. The young man squinted his eyes and stood at the top of the ancient pagoda. He did not leave the ancient pagoda easily. Suyu, if you want to die, don't be impatient. It will be your turn later. I will find the other person first. The young man suppressed his murderous intent and stated his purpose for showing himself. It seemed that suppressing Suyu was just something he did in passing. He had another purpose for showing up. Shinichi, do you still need to hide? Since I have shown myself, it means that everything is over. Even if you continue to hide, it will be of no use. The young man shouted as he looked around. His shout reverberated in every corner of the Jinlong world. Shinichi? Who? Could it be that the otherworldly people had invaded the Jinlong world because of this person? Why had he never heard of this person before? His shout reverberated in the world, but there was no response. The young man's eyes shone with a cold light. After 3 years of probing, we can confirm that you have fallen from the divine altar to an ordinary martial artist. This is an ultimatum for you. I will give you 3 breaths time. If you do not show yourself, we will kill all of Jinlong's living beings. Come out. The young man flew up into the air, and the ancient pagoda beneath his feet started to vibrate vigorously. The ancient pagoda, which was already full of cracks, started to fall into pieces amidst the vibrations. It quickly fell apart and completely disintegrated. Did he just destroy the ancient pagoda? The people in the Dragon Abyss were confused. However, they knew that this person, who called himself the Saint Master, was not a fool. Something even more terrifying must have happened. As expected, the ancient pagoda fell apart. However, a transparent pagoda, which was as tall as a human, gradually appeared from within. It was the pagoda. It emitted a destructive aura. Elder Gio, who was in the Dragon Abyss, was shocked. Impossible. How could this object appear in the hands of the Central Prefecture's king? Could it be that he has already seized the throne of Jojo? It is a top-grade fairy artifact, the Emperor Pagoda. It is a top-grade fairy artifact that can cross hundreds of millions of dimensions. Only the Jojo emperors of each generation can use it. How could he have gotten it? Elder Gio, who was shocked, gradually became desperate. It was as if he had just discovered something impossible. Suyu used his soul eyes to scan the transparent pagoda, which was as tall as a human, at a glance. However, when he looked inside, his expression changed abruptly. His soul was extinguished by some kind of power. Interesting. There is such a talented soul in such a small, desolate land. It seems like he has already reached the second level of his soul. A sinister laugh resounded from within the pagoda. Shortly after, the surface of the transparent pagoda started to distort, forming a vortex that led to the interior of the pagoda. A figure, who was wearing a yellow robe, stepped out from within the vortex. The yellow robe was old, as if it had not been changed for dozens of years. An eerie, chilly aura was emitted from the robe. The owner of the robe was a shriveled old man. His eyes were hollow, and his eye sockets were sunken. 2 green, ghostly flames flickered faintly. At first glance, he seemed like a ghost. Suyu could not sense any vital energy fluctuation from his body. He could not even sense any life force. If he was not standing right in front of Suyu, he would not have been able to discover his existence. As soon as he appeared, Suyu's hair stood on end, and he felt a sense of crisis. An almighty divine master. Suyu's pupils contracted to the size of needles. Chapter 709. Only an almighty divine master could feel such a pressure on one's soul. Suyu had guessed that the great Saint Master wouldn't be the only one participating in this battle, and that there would probably be other fairies or even divine masters. He didn't expect that a divine master would really appear here. After meeting Lu Chuyi, Suyu understood how terrifying a divine master was. A fairy couldn't contend against him. A divine master could decide the life and death of a fairy with a single thought. Even though Suyu had many trump cards, he still wasn't sure that he could deal with a divine master. It was likely that he would be killed by a divine master before he could even use any of his trump cards. Suyu's expression was calm, but his heart was tense and his whole body was on guard. In the dragon abyss, Elder Gio's face was filled with despair as he muttered a name. Bright Light Guard, Venerable Fugue. The Bright Light Guard was the most terrifying faction in the Central Prefecture. The Black Shadow Guard was led by the Great Saint Master. The Bright Light Guard was famous for its heaven-extinguishing divine palm. In the past, the Jinlong continent had been destroyed by the heaven-extinguishing divine palm, and many of its flourishing cities had been destroyed by it. Even now, there were still countless palm imprints left in the Jinlong continent. The yellow-robed man was several miles away from the dragon abyss, but he still heard Elder Gio's exclamation. The green flames in his eye sockets flickered as he looked at the dragon abyss. It seemed like his gaze could penetrate the heavenly orchid silver bamboo and see what was happening inside. Jiu Yuan Zhou, the former third Bright Light Guard. A look of reverence appeared on his face. Then, he realized Elder Gio's situation, and a mocking smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. The former famous Bright Light Guard has become a coward, and you are protected by a junior. What a joke. His mockery made Elder Gio clench his fists and clench his teeth as he said, You helped the evildoer and slaughtered millions of lives. This is the natural cycle of karma, and you will all get what you deserve. In the past, he had refused to carry out orders, and he had been heavily injured by the Blood Emperor. The natural cycle of karma? The past Bright Light Guard is now just a pitiful dog's bark. Venerable Fu Gue sneered coldly. In the past, I had to address you respectfully as a lord, but now, you're just a stray dog in front of me. Isn't this a good feeling? The harsh words made Elder Gio feel humiliated, but there was nothing he could do. You can continue to hide. When I find the Jojo Emperor, I will personally send you to the afterlife. Venerable Fu Gue mocked him, then turned his gaze towards Su Yu, while a cold glint flickered in his eyes. Lad, you're really interesting. I really can't understand why you have so many heavenly orchid silver bamboo leaves, as it's difficult to find even a single leaf in Jojo. The heavenly orchid silver bamboo was the number one divine bamboo in the world that had long been extinct in the 9 prefectures. Only a small number of them survived in the hands of some all-creation's old monsters. They were watered with their blood essence day and night, and only then were they able to be reborn. He couldn't understand how a brat from a savage land like Zhenlong could obtain such a terrifying amount of heavenly orchid silver bamboo leaves. It seems like I must capture you and properly interrogate you. Venerable Fu Gue squinted his eyes and emitted a cold glint. Su Yu's pupils turned serious, and he used his soul eyes to observe his surroundings. The hearts of all the people in the Dragon Abyss were on tenterhooks. After all, how could Su Yu withstand the anger of a divine master? He would probably be reduced to ashes in an instant. As Su Yu looked at the person on the yellow runway, his gaze became ice cold. Is that the case? It's still uncertain who will emerge victorious. He had never feared a battle, even if his enemy was an almighty divine master. Don't bother with him. Leave this lad to me, while you quickly look for the Jojo Emperor. The youth atop the ancient tower spoke. It seemed from his tone that he wasn't afraid of the almighty divine master in front of him. Upon hearing him, Venerable Fu Gue squinted his eyes as he looked at Su Yu. He then turned around and flew toward the continent. Who is this youth? How could the Black Shadow Guard's great Saint Master have the right to order an almighty divine master? As Su Yu examined the youth once again, he suddenly felt like this person was somewhat illusory and ethereal. Moreover, when he looked at him with his soul eyes, he found that his body seemed somewhat fleeting. It was at this moment that the ancient tower shook once again, and a powerful aura emanated from it once again. Moreover, it was several terrifying auras that could make one shudder. Level 9 Fairy. Su Yu's pupils contracted once again, as he felt an extremely powerful existence among those auras. Although it wasn't as suffocating as the almighty divine master, it was still extremely powerful. As Su Yu looked at it, he saw several people wearing different clothes coming out of the ancient tower. Every single one of them emitted a terrifying aura that could shake the continent. Even the weakest among them was at the level 7 fairy realm, which was comparable to the third Saint Master, who was proficient in the ice path. After a rough count, Su Yu discovered that there were 20 level 7 fairy realm people, 10 level 8 fairy realm people, and one extraordinary level 9 fairy realm person, who was half a step into the almighty divine master realm. The third Saint Master and his group of trash are really unreliable. In the end, we still have to deal with them. The level 9 fairy realm leader was a white-haired middle-aged man. His eyes had 2 strange blood-red veins, which emitted a dangerous aura. Any one of these 31 people possessed absolute power that could crush the entire Jinlong continent. Even though the Heavenly Law Alliance had nurtured more than 100 early-stage fairies, they would still be slaughtered in front of these people. Greetings, great Saint Master. After the white-haired middle-aged man appeared, he immediately turned around and kowtowed to the youth. The people behind him also did the same. Is this youth really the great Saint Master? Second Saint Master, you are in charge of taking people and occupying every corner of the continent. Then, you should cooperate with Venerable Fu Gui to look for the Jiuzhou Emperor. Once you find him, you should immediately send a signal. The youth stood with his hands clasped behind his back as he commanded the second Saint Master. Yes, sir. The second Saint Master received the order, then led the people behind him and rushed to every corner of the continent. In the end, only Su Yu and the youth were left. His gaze fell on Su Yu once again, and a cold expression appeared on his cold face. He then revealed a cold smile and said, Su Yu, now that you are free, I will deal with you. As he spoke, he took a step out of the ancient tower. In an instant, the whole world rumbled, and furious thunder rumbled in the sky. The Emperor Tower's whole body shone brightly, then turned into the size of a palm and fell into the youth's palm. Compared to its previous exquisite appearance, the Emperor Tower seemed to have become much more turbid and weak. When Su Yu noticed this, he secretly observed it. Su Yu, I can't help but admit that your luck is too great. In the past, a lad who had just condensed the pure divine decree could have easily killed you. However, the King of Darkness obstructed him, and I didn't expect that you would take advantage of that opportunity to reach your current state. The youth slowly walked over. What caused Su Yu's heart to become grave was that his aura would change with every step he took. From the initial level 5 fairy realm, he quickly advanced to the level 6 fairy realm. From the level 6 fairy realm, he quickly advanced to the level 7 fairy realm. With every step he took, he advanced to the next level. As his cultivation changed, his body started emitting a terrifying aura. It was an aura that seemed familiar to him. A familiar feeling welled up in Su Yu's heart. In an instant, a thought flickered in Su Yu's mind. You are. Chapter 710. The Mysterious Heavenly Divine Pavilion. Su Yu's heart trembled as the sense of familiarity became clearer. It really is you. Su Yu's eyes were filled with coldness and hatred. Creak. The sound of silk ripping could be heard as the light on the youth's body distorted and flickered. Then, a layer of light was torn from the inside out. The ordinary-looking youth had taken on a completely new appearance. He was wearing a jade crown and a luxurious robe. His face was handsome, and his eyes were so sharp that they could see through everything in the world. How could Su Yu forget such a familiar face? Gu Taishu. Su Yu's words were cold. He was Lu Chuyi's fiancé, a genius of the 18 blessed and heavenly lands, a peak late-stage divine master expert. He was only a step away from becoming an all-creation expert. When he had descended upon the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, he had almost killed Su Yu as a late-stage fairy. If Hong Wan's clone had not come and scare him away, Su Yu's fate would have been unknown. Su Yu had guessed the great Saint Master's identity many times, but he had never thought it would be Gu Taishu. No wonder the Pearl Scales blood centipede had an extra strand of real spirit blood in its body after it was stolen. Its power was comparable to a 9th-grade fairy. You, who refined the 9 fairy elixir, must have a lot of real spirit blood in your body. Su Yu's eyes shone with understanding. Gu Taishu was frantically collecting the blood of the 9 ancient real spirits to refine the 9 fairy elixir. He was trying to break through the all-creation realm. Using a strand of real spirit blood to modify the pearl scales blood centipede was a piece of cake. If I hadn't been afraid of the Jojo Emperor, do you think I would have let you live after you stole the pearl scales blood centipede? Gu Taishu's aura was still rising crazily. In the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, Su Yu and Gu Taishu had become sworn enemies. Gu Taishu would never let Su Yu go if he had the chance. However, he was still in Jojo, yet he had not made a move. It was obvious that he was afraid. The one he was most afraid of was the mysterious Jojo Emperor. The otherworldly army had invaded for 3 years, and even the Blood Emperor had not made a move. This proved that the Jojo Emperor's cultivation was not even 1/10 of his original power. That was why Gu Taishu had dared to show himself. The only thing Su Yu found strange was that Gu Taishu had 2 identities at the same time. One was a student of the Purple Cloud Palace, and the other was a guard of the Central Prefecture's king. If he remembered correctly, the 18 blessed and heavenly lands did not have a harmonious relationship with the Central Prefecture. Now, your luck has run out, and no one could save you anymore. Gu Taishu's rising cultivation gradually came to a stop, and it finally stopped at the level 9 fairy realm. How was the later stage of the fairy realm similar to the battle in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion? In that battle, Su Yu had almost lost his life. Would the same thing happen again? Su Yu's expression was calm, and no panic could be seen in his eyes. It's the scene again. Our unfinished battle can come to an end today. Indeed, we could put a full stop to it. You're just a lowly existence who has survived until today by sheer luck. You're, and I belong to 2 different worlds. Your futile attempt to cling to her has sealed your fate of death. Gu Taishu took a step forward. This step seemed to have descended from the heavens, exerting a great pressure on one's soul. The bodies of the second Saint Master and the others, who had not gone far, trembled as they looked back. Their eyes were filled with reverence. As expected of him, the heir of the Central Prefecture's king, he has comprehended the pure divine decree, which allowed him to transform into the heavens and suppress all heroes. How terrifying was that? Even a late-stage divine master at the same level as him would not be able to easily shake such a pressure, replacing the heavens and becoming the new heavens. This was Gu Taishu's divine decree. How arrogant and presumptuous it was. The divine decree was the extreme embodiment of a person's will. This meant that Gu Taishu had subconsciously wanted to replace the heavens. His domineering and arrogant nature was evident from this. With the dragon abyss of the 9 underworlds as its loyalty, the surrounding ocean within a radius of 500 kilometers sunk, and the air exploded as it sank into extreme pressure. Su Yu himself also felt the pressure from both his soul and body. The protective vital energy on the surface of his body was instantly shattered, becoming as thin as a piece of paper. Under the astonishing pressure, the blood in his body flowed at an extremely fast speed, even bursting through his skin and spurting out from his pores like lines of blood. Cracking sounds could be heard coming from all the bones in his body, as if they were being crushed. Su Yu's soul was also trembling intensely, and an indescribable pain reverberated in the depths of his mind. Just a single step had put Su Yu in danger of destroying both his body and soul. His divine decree was so terrifying that it was terrifying. Destroy. Gu Taishu's eyes were ice cold as he took another step forward. This step caused the world to rumble, and the bottom of the ocean was shattered, revealing countless giant cracks. The seawater within 1,000 miles was absorbed by the cracks, and 1,000 miles of dry land appeared in the boundless ocean. Su Yu's body was like an ordinary person's, and he was heavily injured. With a bang, he was pressed into the cracks. They were both grade 9 fairies, but the current Gu Taishu was much more terrifying than the clone in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion. He was more than 10 times stronger. Even an early-stage almighty divine master might not be able to escape unscathed from such a strike. Seeing Su Yu, who was covered in blood, falling into the cracks of the ocean, Gu Taishu's eyes were ice cold. That's all you've got. Then, his beautiful face twitched. He's not dead yet. His body is tougher than I thought. However, Before he could finish his words, a faint sound of thunder came from above his head. Looking up, he saw a silver-haired figure stepping out of the white clouds in the boundless horizon of the sky. His clothes were neat and tidy, and he looked calm. There was no trace of blood on his body. Is that so? Your insight seems to be very ordinary, unlike an almighty divine master. You didn't even notice that you destroyed the phantom clone. Are you really Gu Taishu? Su Yu, who was standing in the clouds with his hands clasped behind his back, spoke calmly. However, when Gu Taishu heard it, it was extremely harsh. While the anger in his heart was rising, Gu Taishu's heart trembled slightly. Where did he teleport? Why didn't I notice? Before he could figure it out, Su Yu put down his hands behind his back and extended his right palm. His expression was solemn, and a hazy fluorescent light gradually condensed in his palm. I am Tyene, and my palm is like the bright moon, Su Yu murmured softly, and the hazy light in his palm rapidly increased. Although it was the sun in the sky, and the sunlight was dazzling, it could not cover up the hazy light. Instead, it was being covered by the hazy light. The hazy light became stronger and stronger, and it enveloped Su Yu. Finally, even the whole world was integrated into the dazzling brilliance. Even the nine-heaven sun was covered. As far as the eye could see, the only thing left in the sky was the huge moon that spanned hundreds of miles, as well as the faintly discernible silhouettes within the bright moon. It was as if an immortal on the bright moon had returned on the moon. Heaven extinguishing palm. Gu Taishu's indifferent expression changed slightly. Did Zhou Yuanzhou hand over this celestial level cultivation technique to you? But you actually succeeded. The heaven extinguishing divine palm was a remnant of a celestial level cultivation method, and only those with nature-defying comprehension could comprehend it. Even Gu Taishu had not fully comprehended it. However, Su Yu had actually done it. Among the 10 great Radiance Guards, who had not spent dozens of years to successfully cultivate the heaven-extinguishing divine palm. But how long had Su Yu been training? Gu Taishu's face darkened as he thought of the gift of the soul. It was said that the stronger one's soul was, the higher one's power of comprehension would be. The 10 bright light guards had souls that were far stronger than those of the same level. The killing intent in his eyes did not decrease, but increased. At this moment, the bright moon covered the sky and covered the sun. It was as if the stars were crashing down from the 9 heavens. Boom! With a deafening sound, the bright moon fell like Su Yu's palm. The dried-up blue sea fiercely trembled. The second Saint Master and the others, who were thousands of miles away, turned their heads and their expressions changed. The first style of the heaven-extinguishing divine palm, the great moon palm, the second Saint Master was shocked, and his expression changed several times. He clenched his teeth and shouted, "Return immediately! The great Saint Master is in danger." One of the fairies hesitated and said, "Second Saint Master, with the great Saint Master's power, he probably doesn't need our help." No, the second Saint Master's expression was grave. If the great Saint Master's real body, Gu Taishu, used his full power, we wouldn't even be able to defeat him. However, the great Saint Master is just a clone of Gu Taishu's real body. His cultivation isn't even a tenth of his real body's. If Su Yu was here, he would be shocked by the youth's identity. He was Gu Taishu's clone. The youth's cultivation was powerful, and his body was so real that it was hard for Su Yu to believe that he was just a clone. However, this was the only way to explain why there were 2 Gu Taixis in the Central Prefecture and the 18 blessed and heavenly lands at the same time. I thought that even if it was just a clone, it would be more than enough to deal with this person. However, I didn't expect that this person would be proficient in the Bright Light Guard's ultimate technique. Moreover, he has even cultivated it to the great Saint Master's level. He's definitely not a simple person. We mustn't let our guard down. Let's return immediately and help the great Saint Master. The second Saint Master made a prompt decision. Thus, the 31 people turned around and returned. In the dried-up land, the moonlight that filled the sky dissipated, and the trembling ground gradually stopped. The gentle moonlight still lingered in the air, as well as the terrifying destructive power. In the sky above the dried-up land, where Gu Taishu was standing, his clothes were scorched in several places. His jade crown had fallen off, and his black hair was scattered all over. His handsome face was slightly pale, and it was filled with deep anger. A jade cat had shattered in his palm. This jade cat was a miraculous treasure that could replace death. Gu Taishu had used it once in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, and now he was using it again. We haven't met for half a year, and I have to admit that your power has improved a lot. You've actually forced me to use it again. Gu Taishu was deeply humiliated. He had thought that if he got serious this time, it would be easy for him to kill Suyu. However, the fact was that Suyu had forced him to use his life-saving treasure from the very beginning. The heaven-extinguishing divine palm was a remnant of a fairy-level cultivation technique, and its might wasn't any weaker than the Great Sun Punishment Fairy picture. Suyu furrowed his brows slightly. This life-saving treasure again? I want you dead. Gu Taishu let out a low roar from his throat, like an infuriated beast. Buddha mantra! Gu Taishu roared angrily as he weaved signs with his hands, and a series of obscure notes shot out of his mouth. The seemingly ordinary notes produced a terrifying vibration as soon as they came out of his mouth. The whole sky was trembling intensely, and the space was like a cracked mirror as many terrifying spatial fissures appeared. A sound wave cultivation technique. Suyu raised his brows slightly. A legendary level sound wave cultivation technique. Nothing can block it, not even the heaven-extinguishing divine palm. Gu Taishu's eyes were filled with killing intent. Energy in the form of sound waves was different from ordinary techniques, and it was difficult to deal with it. The only way was to defend. However, how could a half-fairy withstand the sound wave cultivation technique released by a ninth-grade fairy?